have, like you didn't have an industrial park that after 5 o'clock, there was no one there. So you then take an industrial and you allow some service uses, you allow some retail uses, or if you have a commercial area, you have some residential so people can walk to the shops. And so we went on that trend and we changed how we look at commercial areas. And so we have a neighborhood centers commercial area. Okay, I think I just heard my voice twice. We have neighborhood centers, which are MU1, which is a rural area, and that's only in the Northampton district, planning district. And then we have MU2, which is in our urban and suburban areas. Cuyahoga River is an urban, State Road, Portage Trail, and Bailey, Monroe Falls area are suburban areas. And those are, an example is the Chestnut Crossing area. And you have a mix of use. People can live above the store, they can live close by. And so we pretty much kept those the same. And we have our urban areas, which is our downtown. We have MU5 and MU6. And again, it's walkable, people can live above the store. And then when we went into the suburban areas, which we usually call the areas developed after World War II, is some State Road area, what we're doing here now, looking at in Bailey, Monroe Falls, we created an MU3 and an MU4. And they're sort of like this hybrid that's sort of a commercial district, but also allows for residential and other uses. And a good example of that is actually MU3 is French Mill, which the front of it has mixed use and the rest of it is residential. And then we have our pure commercial area, and we have Howe Avenue is the poster child for that. And we did, after we changed, for example, State Road was mixed use, but we had to change that back to C1 because Portage Crossing wasn't mixed use. And so we changed that back to C1, but it is surrounded by mixed use. So that's how we look at our commercial zones and what's allowed. So anything that says mixed use, you can do residential, and you can do retail, and you can do office. And it's by different intensities. You can't put a big box in an MU5 or neighborhood center. You could do it potentially in an MU4, but it's difficult, but you can do it in a C1. So on this project, again, we're MU4. What this allows for is residential, single family attached or townhomes, and multifamily. It allows for mixed use buildings or a mixed use. What we call a vertical mixed use is apartments like French Mill Road above a storefront, or it could be horizontal too, like French Mill, where you can do commercial out front and you can do residential behind it. You can do civic buildings, you can do offices, and you can do retail. And those are typical retail uses. But we guide those, or we regulate them by size. So we don't really regulate it. So you can't really build a big box because we don't allow big boxes, but you can do smaller retail that mimic other retail, let's say on Howe Avenue. So that's the code. Now I always like to go into some history because how did we get to this place? And so I'm going to just briefly go. I usually start around the merger and move forward. In 1987, this property was in Northampton Township. Prior to the merger, it was zoned R2. R2 is half-acre lots and single family. In 1989, after the merger, the city rezoned this property R4, quarter-acre lots and single family. What that did was it allowed for the Cedarwood allotment to be developed, and in 1990. And Cedarwood was owned by the Rex Humbard Foundation. They sold 14.3 acres to B&C Development, Inc. for the creation of Cedarwood allotment. And they retained about 9 acres that were facing Portage Trail, which is where this site is today. In 1983, the remaining 9.2 acres, in 1993, I don't know if I thought it might have said 83, but 1993, the remaining acres, which were owned by the Rex Humbard Foundation, were rezoned to port. This was stood for Planning Office Residential Transitional Zoning District. It allowed for townhomes, attached dwellings. It allowed for offices, nursing homes, childcare, and public buildings. And then in 2005, we did away with these overlay districts, these planned districts, and we put things into mixed use or whatever they were. And in this case, it was MU4, a suburban corridor mixed use that allowed for attached single family, multifamily, civic uses, office, and retail. So that brings us to today, where we're at MU4. Another interesting thing is when I look back in the files, it's very unusual to have a 40-foot buffer around your subdivision. It just doesn't happen by chance. And so we looked into it, and during the Planning Commission meeting, one of the things was, it was always thought that the front acreage was always going to be developed differently than residential. But that's why it was retained by Rex Humbard Foundation. It would be used temporarily as parking, but it was eventually going to be developed. And so the Planning Commission required a 40-foot buffer, and it was actually put on the plat, and it ran from lots 13 to 27, and it was a 40-foot buffer that would and mounded and buffer. And in the files, there was two different ways. I'm not quite sure what they ended up planting. Probably the lower one is probably more like it, but that was put in there to protect from potentially different development. And there's always a transition between where you are technically in a residential and a commercial area, especially on State Road corridor, is because it's a retail district that was started in the 20s because it was a highway, and it's just one parcel deep, and after that there's residential. And so probably because of those type of things, they made sure that there was a buffer. And so that buffer exists today. So that's just a little bit of history. As we go to the project itself is, what Conrad's wrote in their application was, Conrad's Tire Express and Total Car Care is proposing a new Blue Falls car wash facility. And the site really, as far as I can tell, there might have been a few houses on that site at one time in the 60s, I think someone told me, but it was never really developed. And so there's been no real recent development there. The facility is a single lane automatic tunnel style car wash with a side canopy cover over 3 pay stations. And that's changed a little bit because of an easement. And the site plan includes vacuum stations and parking spaces and a masonry trash enclosure. The exterior of the 5,200 square foot facility is finished in a variety of materials, including walls of metal, glass, ephes, cultured stone veneers, while the roof is finished with a clear acrylic panel, and the blue and gray exterior and signage package emphasize the corporate brand colors of Blue Falls. The area of the site not required for facility and paving are to be landscaped and a variety of plantings and grasses to soften the overall impact. So what you see here is the site. Again, the site is in this corner here. The rest is, Conrad's would not buy this rest of this property. They would just buy this area here. An example, I went on the internet and found one in North Olmsted. It's probably similar to what we're looking at, is there. And then this is the revised site plan that was submitted. There were some minor changes that we'll talk about a little bit later on the site plan. And as you can see, they're keeping existing tree cover in this corner. They're adding new landscaping. Here is that 40-foot buffer, Cedar Hill, and so this is generally what the site is like. So go through the zoning certificate review file. I'm going to try to go through this quick. There's a lot here, but we'll go through this, and I think everybody, I'm sure, read this in your report. The first question is the request harmonious with and in accordance with the general goals and objectives and any specific goals and objectives of the general plan? Well, our general plan is basically the development code. There was a companion plan that went with it, And basically it set the parameters of what zoning would be, what should go in that zoning. In addition, in 2005, 2006, as we were doing the code, we also did a state road redevelopment and retail analysis master plan because we were looking at hopefully redeveloping the state road plaza. And so what you see, and we'll go over this, is that it's pretty consistent with what we wanted to do in 2005. Nothing's ever 100%, but it's pretty consistent. And we'll look at that now. And also, I just want to show this too, because I like to show this because as we look at consistency, is one of the map on the left is what we call a development pattern map. It shows how development occurred. And as you can see, the browns are pre-1951 browns and beiges, and the blues are post-1962 and up. The lighter the blue, the earlier in the 60s. And as you can see, as we grow, and here's the site here, and you can see with the residential development behind this happened in the mid 90s. And so as you can see is that development, even before the merger, the light blues were happening because there was water and sewer there in Northampton Township. And then development on the west side where the national park is, it wasn't then, but there was limited growth because there's no utilities. And so in our code, we ended up making that national park and rural because we had no desire to see that developed. And then on the right is a land use distribution plan. And it just shows how land use is industrial's blue, red is commercial. And you can see how land is being developed. And you can see the difference between Howe Road, I can find my arrow over here, and State Road and Portage Trail. It's very narrow. It's because it was just the first parcel, and that parcel might only be 120 feet deep, but it's commercial. So it limits the type of development on State Road, except where Menards is and the shopping plaza. Everything else is narrow development. And so there's always this transition that's going to happen no matter what you put there. That transition is always going to be up against a residential neighborhood. It's just the way it is. So the other thing was the state road development and retail analysis master plan. As we started looking at how state road could be developed, we wanted to look at the whole corridor. And so we divided it into 5 areas: State Road, Mid Corridor, North Haven, General Hospital, now Western Reserve, and the Southern Gateway. And we had different things we wanted to see there. We'd already rezoned the property to mixed use, or was in the process. So it really turned out to be a mixed use. And then that bled into some of the areas in Portage Trail too, because of the shopping plaza. So we did that. And one of the things at that time is that, everybody, the owner of the State Road Shopping Plaza is saying, this is a terrible retail area. No one wants to come here. It's dying. We had this old shopping plaza. And so we use this as our guidance as we move forward. And the market study basically said that we can get a share of 30% of our market area, and that could be in total trade area. That would be $185 million that we can get potentially 30%, and retail and food was 237. And so based on that, we did some calculation that State Road was actually a pretty good place for businesses. And it could be a pretty good place for City of Cuyahoga Falls because it meant more income tax. And they projected $316,000 a year, more property tax, $125,000 in sales, and use taxes, $871,000. And so we knew that we're going into that, just as we did downtown, that if we did it right, it would happen. And so what happened, as you see, we have probably about $75 million of new development since 2013, which is a good thing. So when we go in this, we look at these plans, we make sure the zoning is right, we make sure we allow for development, we know there's going to be transitions, we look at how those transitions work, and so that's what we do. when we look at these areas. And this is an example of that. So let's go to our second question, our second criteria. Will the use be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate with existed or planned character of a general vicinity and not change the essential criteria of the area? This includes special requirements on operation, extent or duration of use at a particular location that minimize any immediate or potential future impacts that harm the existing or planned character for the district or the area. So when we look at conditional use permits, is we want to know whether this is going to hurt the area, and what are those things, and then how do you then create barriers so it doesn't happen. So when we look at this project, the project meets all building setbacks except for the front setback, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Landscape screening, lighting, building facade requirements, and then there's safeguards such as the large rear yard setback, hooded LED, site lighting, limited business hours, additional landscaping and screening that hopefully will protect adjacent uses that aren't commercial. When we look at the rear yard setback, typically if you were to come in here and do a typical MU4 development, you can be 20 feet to the rear of the property. This project, they showed 95 feet, but it doesn't even go to the building. It's probably another 10 feet. And so there's 95 feet that they show in the site plan to the rear yards setback, to the rear lot line. This is 75 feet of additional setback, or a 375% increase in the minimum rear yard setback. So there's really a big rear yard setback that benefits everyone. Site lighting. They're doing LED fixtures or on 12-foot poles. They can go higher than 12 foot, but 12 foot keeps the light low. So it's at a street light level. In addition, there's no site lighting in the rear portion of the property adjacent to the residential district. The hours of operations. The hours of operation are Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., Sundays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., closed on New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas Day. I guess they're open on Easter. In contrast, the adjacent Get-Go is open 24 hours a day. Landscape buffering, and Get-Go did need a conditional use permit. The landscape buffering, the plan also retains existing tree cover and adds new landscaping. In addition, there's also a dense landscaping buffer on Cedar Hill property line that will remain. The new site plan also includes a 6-foot solid fence. Since the time, this is our third time we're at this. The other 2 meetings were canceled because of COVID-19, is that they added a fence in the back for additional screening. And then queuing area. The code requires a minimum queuing area of 200 feet at each service area where a vehicle may stop at a full service car wash. The code also states that queuing areas shall not intersect with any residential pedestrian connection on the lot or in a public right of way, and queuing areas and service areas or facilities shall be set back at least 30 feet from the right of way. The plan includes 3 165-foot queuing areas, total 495 feet for one service bay, of which this is 147% increase in queuing capacity. The queuing area is also approximately 50 feet from the right of way. And just shows some areas we're looking at. This is the existing landscaping, the existing buffer, new landscaping. The rear portion, this white line is the fence, the new fence they're putting up. And then they also have an area where their retention basin would be. They also have a lighting schematic plan that keeps all the lighting on the site, shows the light types, and then you can see the queuing lane here. And whoops, went wrong way. And this, I just included this to show you where the site is. So when you look at this line, it's about here. So you can see these landscaping features here already. I just included this here between the May 2020 and the June 2020, there was 2 site plans. And the new site plan is very close to the one you originally had. It shows a smaller retention basin in the rear, and they show potentially another one out front. It also shows the fence and a few changes. There was an easement going across here that they couldn't build a canopy, so they changed that too. So there's really not a lot of changes, but you did receive that, and I just wanted to go through the difference here. Third criteria, is the use not going to be hazardous or disturbing to the existing or planned future neighborhood uses and not detrimental to the community as a whole? Well, an automated car wash facility is typically not hazardous to adjacent properties or the community. You know, it's not Youngstown Sheet and Tube. It's a car wash. There's not a lot of hazards. You know, most of those hazards is noise and light, and as we talked about, those things are trying to be taken care of, protect against unfavorable effects. There's also potentially a water recycling and cleaning products, and I have a letter saying that all their products are environmentally friendly they're using, and they are recycling water, and that water will go into the storm and the sanitary sewer. And so they're doing these things that are as environmentally friendly as a car wash can be. Also, we talked about in previous staff reports about the need for a traffic impact study. We didn't really think that there was going to be a lot of traffic associated with the car wash. And so we saw other traffic impact studies for car washes. And so one of our original recommendations is they have to do that. Well, they went ahead and did that in May and June. And basically what it says is that the development traffic can be accommodated without adversely impacting the area roadway network. And what they come up with, they said the study analyzed 2021 as the opening year of development, and the AM peak hour occurs between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. with an average of 32 car washes. The midday peak hours is 1 to 2 p.m. with an average 52 car washes, and the PM peak hours occur between 4 and 5 p.m. with an average of 59 car washes. These volumes were then used as numbers of trip generations. And they also, when they did this, because of the COVID-19 changes, they had to accommodate with less traffic now because of that. And so their recommendations were pretty much with the entranceways, construct the driveways, how that's being done, and that when the city does the road project, you know, that the left turn lane should be there, continue being there. And we can talk about, maybe Tony later can talk about that project where it is now, but and then they looked at both drives. So at the end of the day, basically, the car wash doesn't create a lot of traffic, and because it's on an arterial, one of our busiest streets, and there's going to be a street improvement project, that all this should be able to be handled today, and much better after the road project is done. The next item is the use going to be consistent with the intent and planning criteria of the zoning district and not adversely impact the intent and planning criteria of any adjacent zoning districts. And again, on the right is the zoning map. See MU4, Porter's Crossing is C1, Menards is C1. There's an MU3 north. There's R4, R3, R5. And so it's a typical map area of State Road in Portage Trail. So MU4 suburban urban corridor. Code says this district is intended for corridors that connect different districts over long linear distances. It has a transportation corridor as its primary focal point. Commercial uses and site design that may not easily assimilate into the design and development pattern of other mixed-use districts may be appropriate in this district. The district is characterized by a variety of uses, but all uses present a consistent and compatible presence along the length of the corridor. So basically this is saying is that MU4 is a little bit different because it does feel like a commercial zone, but what we try to do is make it more mixed use, introduce residential if we can. The code states that the following criteria shall be used to assist in determining the appropriateness of zoning property to MU4. Any land directly fronting along an arterial street in the Bailey Monroe Falls planning area, State Portage Trail planning area, or Cuyahoga River planning area may be appropriate for MU4 zoning. So it's an arterial, Portage Trail is an arterial street. It meets that criteria. Higher density residential uses and non-residential uses eligible in MU4 zoning district should only be allowed within a quarter mile of another mixed use center, a C1 commercial district or an E1 employment district. These more intense.
Just a sec. Sorry, I couldn't find one commercial district.
My Surrey is talking to me. Sorry about that. I must have said something and it's talking back at me. These more intense MU4 uses should create transitions to the more intense zoning districts along the corridor. Lower density residential uses eligible in MU4 zoning district should be used to create transitions to any adjacent residential zoning district. So typically you would have a commercial, and then in the best situation, there would be residential behind it, like French Mill. Unless otherwise modified through a planning district procedure, a conditional use permit. So these things can be modified if you have a conditional use permit. And this could go to setbacks, other things that make improve the site plan with conditions. So basically, this use is allowed. It also says you can use a conditional use permit to put conditions that could make the project better. So the proposed car wash is allowed in an MU4 district with a conditional use permit. Conditional use, conditions and criteria for conditional use. Any conditional use is subject to review criteria for conditional zoning certificate in chapter 111308, the standards for the base zoning district, the design regulations title 4, and all applicable regulations. So these conditional uses are subject to the conditional use section, standards for that zoning district, and title 4, which are design criteria. Conditional uses may be subject to special conditions in addition to the required standards, addressing any of the following that the planning director, planning commission, or city council determines are applicable. The planning director, the commission, and council may make determination in order to best protect adjacent property and public welfare and bring about the purpose and intent of a zoning district and these regulations. So planning staff, planning commission, and city council could put conditions, and that's what a conditional use permit. And so I have them listed here. I also have a table, and we'll go through the table because some of these issues have actually come up that we talked about. So I'll read through this as quick as I can. Relationships to other, the first item is relationships to other uses in the general vicinity, including additional limitations on the proximity to those uses or proximity to the same or similar uses that is the subject of the conditional use certificate application. This determination shall be made considering the utility of the use to other uses in the general vicinity and the impact on adjacent properties and the intent of the district. So first of all, again, State Road, the Portage Shell corridor is probably the most diverse and largest geographic commercial area, mixed use / area in the city and in the region. And that's changed also when I say region because of Portage Crossing. At one time, it was a regional area, of course, with the State Road Shopping Plaza. It then lost that regional appeal and it was brought back with Portage Crossing. Commercial uses range from Menards, which is about 300,000 square feet, to a shoe repair that's about 500 square feet. And a lot of the uses, which is good about State Road, it runs from franchises, large franchises, to mom and pop stores. There's also one full service car wash and one automated car wash within the State Road Trail area. The corridor also has 3 grocery stores, numerous fast food restaurants, apparel shops, service type businesses. And because this corridor is large and diverse, it is really difficult to make an argument that as a conditional use permit that we can limit car wash facilities, just as it would be difficult to limit grocery stores, restaurants, beauty shops, doctor's offices. And so when you have this diverse, very large corridor, you end up having multiple uses. It's not like a neighborhood center. It's not even like a downtown, although you could have multiple downtown uses too. And so when you make that argument as we have too many car washes in the city, is you have to be able to say, this is a regional commercial area, and it's hard to limit that. Just as we can't say Market District, we have 2 grocery stores already, or Marks or Acme. And then the other thing was impact on adjacent properties, and we talked about this. The corridor is very narrow. It's the majority of commercial uses are adjacent to residential uses. And so when we look at new development, when we look at like the McDonald's that was rebuilt on State Road, we spent a lot of time on their landscaping. We looked at Portage Crossing, we did that, although most of Portage Crossing is not adjacent to residential. And so you have these push points when you have a narrow corridor. The next item is location requirements or limitations in relation to specific streets. Conditions may be considered both the functional classification and the design of the street as described in chapter 1122, and may include adding or limiting requirements to pedestrian and vehicle connections to adjacent properties. So basically it's saying that if you're going to do this, we want it to be accessible to as many people. The proposed facility would be located on an arterial street and on one of the busiest roads in the city. Site design is accommodating vehicle ingress and egress, of course, it's a car wash, and also vehicle movement within the site, and pedestrian connections eventually will be accomplished through the future road construction project. The next item is special lots and dimension standards, setbacks or building line regulations that better protect adjacent property and the character of the district or design quality of the public right-of-way. The proposed site plan includes, again, a 95-foot rear setback. The area is also heavily screened in order to create a rear yard setback. The front 100-foot setback is not being met. So we talked about that, is it should be at 75, and I'm sorry, the front 100 is not being met. So they are, it should be 75 is not being met. But as you move the building forward, you then don't meet some of the setbacks. And we have the ability, I think in this case, is to try to get it as forward as possible without ruining any queuing of cars and things like that to protect the residential behind it. Additional site design, building design, open space, landscaping, and sign requirements that emphasize the character, the general area, and de-emphasize the presence of the conditional use permits. Again, the building will meet or exceed site design, lighting, landscaping, and eventually sign criteria. Buffering, screening, and fencing that minimize the impact of the use and preserve the safety of the general area with particular consideration of noise, odor, vibrations, traffic, or other impacts of the conditional use permit. The proposed use design includes heavy landscaping, fencing to minimize adjacent negative impacts. The site also includes very large queuing areas for vehicles and limited lighting. The traffic impact study has also made recommendations for ingress and egress. Next, the special requirement on operations, extent, or duration of the use at a particular location that minimize any immediate or potential future impact that harm the existing or planned character for the district area. Again, we talked about those hours. They are typically normal business hours. The next item is most appropriate and efficient use of land, consider potential future uses in relation to the general plan. The remainder of the site, approximately 7 acres, could be developed into a mixed use or residential, which also conforms to zoning or general plan. So they are using the minimum they have to build their site. Again, this is one parcel today. and it will have to be split. We haven't mentioned that, but this property will be split off from the remainder, and the remainder will be up for sale for something else, and they would have to meet those zoning requirements. The next item is furthering intent of the planning area and the zoning district in which the land is located. The proposed use furthers the commercial intent of the corridor and is consistent with existing long-range plans that we talked about. And then finally, compliance with federal, state, and other local regulations, permits, or license requirements necessary for the use. And again, the facility will meet all government regulations. Next, the site is designed in compliance with these regulations and other applicable rules and regulations. So again, the lot and building dimensions, the site plan generally meets section 1132.12 MU4 suburban corridor lot and building dimension standards, except the building setback 100 feet from the street, and the maximum setback is 75. So it's 25 over the maximum setback. However, the additional setback is needed for the queuing area. Parking, the plan shows 6 parking spaces, however, 10 are required. The site generally conforms with 1143 mixed-use center design in the following manner. The building includes a base, body, and crown using different materials. The building meets allowed facade materials, except that brick, stone, and precast stone must make up 60% of the front facade. The parking lot and driveways meet code standards. Lighting design meets requirements. Landscaping meets buffering requirements. And of course, we'll review all this in the final review during the zoning certificate process. 6, the final item. The site adequately served by essential public facilities and services such as vehicle and pedestrian access, emergency services, and public safety, drainage, and utilities, and any necessary supporting civic use. Today, there is no sewer going to the site. It's nearby, as you can see on the map, this yellow line. It needs to be advanced to this site, to the site here. According to a June 23, 2020 sanitary sewer capacity analysis report, the sanitary sewer in the area has the adequate capacity to properly service the existing users and proposed car wash. Pipe capacity exceeds the cumulative peak hourly design flow for all pipes between the proposed car wash and the existing Mudbrook interceptor sewer. Summit County has reviewed this sanitary sewer capacity analysis, and they concur with the report. The developer is now working with the Get-Go, Giant Eagle, to advance the sewer from this point right here. The site has water running through it. There is an easement that affected the queuing lane, and so there's a water line running through the site. The site will need to comply with city water requirements, stormwater requirements. That hasn't been reviewed yet. City engineer will review that. The site is designed to meet vehicular access requirements. So it meets those public utility requirements, except for sanitary sewer. When Tony DeMasi made some comments, I'll go through this quickly, and Tony can remark later if he likes. Portage Trail West Street Improvement Project, Portage Trail Extension West is currently being designed to be improved with additional turn lanes and sidewalks to facilitate the design. 10 feet of additional right-of-way at the parcel would be helpful in locating future sidewalk and utility poles at this location. Sanitary service now adjacent to the site, as we talked about. Water line, the water line is located on a 20-foot easement on the property. Stormwater management would have to follow our new stormwater requirements, 112403, and this is in the Mudbrook watershed. So special provisions need to be met. Not quite sure how that line got there. I guess we're going to have to, I don't remember doing it. So let's look at the findings and mitigations. The proposed car wash facility is consistent with general plan goals, current uses, and zoning. there's really not a lot of mitigation other than it's not happening and something else goes there that would have to go through the same process. The proposed car wash facility includes large setbacks, proper site lighting, normal commercial business hours of operations, additional landscaping buffer that will protect potentially adverse effects. The city should make the hours of operations conditional. And what I mean by that is that when they say they're going to open these hours, that should be one of the conditions. So in 3 years, they don't decide to go to 24-hour operation. The proposed vehicle wash facility includes large rear setbacks, additional landscaping buffering, and excess vehicle queuing to safeguard the site against adverse effects. Right now, we think the fencing and the landscaping is adequate, but we could make a provision to say if there are areas that we think are kind of light in landscaping, we can require some additional evergreens. The applicant is 25 feet over the 75-foot minimum setback. Well, one of the things that Tony talked about in one of our conditions is that that Conrad's gives us 10 feet of of property up against our Portage Trail right of way for the project, the road project. And so that would make it 90 feet. And so they're only 15 feet over that. And that, you know, maybe there is some wiggle room that it could be moved even closer. But I think being at that location and having over 100 feet is probably adequate. So so when I say 100 feet at this point, if they give us 10 feet for future right of way, the setback is only 90 feet. The code requires 10 guest or employee parking spaces. Therefore, 4 additional parking spaces are required. They're going to have to give us 4 additional parking spaces. The code requires 60% of the front facade be covered with brick, stone, precast stone. The mitigation, they have to give us the extra brick and stone. Landscaping must meet Chapter 1145 landscape design. We will review final landscape design during the zoning certificate process and could require some additional landscaping. The site needs lacks sanitary sewer connections. The applicant, in order for this project to go, they need to extend the sewer or this project is not happening. The applicant needs to grant the city a 10-foot wide area that will be added to the Portage Trail right away. This should be accomplished prior to the zoning certificate approval and coordinated with city engineer, or this could be a condition. The applicant must design stormwater management system to meet section 112403. Our city engineering department must review for accuracy during the zoning certificate approval process. And even though the car wash is not a large traffic generating facility, the city should better understand traffic being generated by the car wash facility. The traffic report is complete, and we understand that it doesn't add a lot of traffic. So that leads to the recommendations. The planning staff recommends approval of project CZ-20-00011 Blue Falls Car Wash with the following stipulations. 1, proposed car wash and vacuum hours. We included vacuum hours in those hours too. Of operations are Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sundays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and closed on New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas Day. 2, the front setback shall be no greater than 90 feet. 3, the final design shall include 10 guest and employee parking spaces. 4, 60% of the front facade shall be covered with brick stone or precast stone. 5, landscaping must meet Chapter 1145 landscape design. In addition, a 6-foot solid fence shall be installed to the rear of the queuing lane to block automobile headlights. 6, the applicant must tie into the Summit County sewer system. 7, the applicant must grant a 10-foot wide strip of land parallel to the Portage Trail West to the city for Portage Trail Improvement Project. 9, the applicant shall meet Section 1124 floodplain and stormwater regulations. 10, the exterior lighting must meet Section 1143-08. And 11, all conditional use requirements must be included in their submission, zoning certificate application submission. And that completes my reports. Later I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Fred. At this time, unless the commissioners have any direct questions for Fred, if you do, I'll give you a minute and you can ask. If not, we will move on. So I'll give you a minute to consider that.
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Fred, you had mentioned that that parcel is going to be split because right now it's owned by the cathedral, so there are no property taxes assessed to that piece of parcel, correct?
Correct.
So Conrad's going to buy half of the parcel, or?
They're going to buy that site plan that you see, which is about 1.5 acres. That's what they're going to buy. So that will be split off from the cathedral property.
Okay, so the remaining piece of parcel, will that meet code at that time?
Yeah, I mean, it could be developed in the future according to MU4 requirements. Yes, and it will continue being brokered for sale.
Okay, and then another question. When we're looking at the traffic study that was half completed, I guess, because it was COVID at the time. And obviously we had a state shutdown with stay-at-home orders. And from what I read, the other studies that were done were from other facilities. Is that correct?
I'm going to have the traffic engineers here, and I don't want to get anything wrong. And so I think after the developer makes their presentation, I would rather have him answer that question.
Okay.
Commissioner Ricker, we'll have an additional opportunity to ask questions. Right now, we just want to see if on Fred's presentation, if there was anything.
Okay.
We'll all have an opportunity after the Conrad's team presents. Would any other commissioner have any questions for Mr. Guerrero?
I do not.
I had one, am I allowed to
Sure, go ahead.
question that? This is Joe Pro. The conditional that we're approving here is really about the front setback. Everything else has met it. And the front setback conditional use is because the developer is giving extra screening and area behind it in order to move it forward. Is that what I'm understanding? That everything else meets everything, the criteria?
Yes and no. I think you're right. It meets a lot of requirements. However, a conditional use permit is needed in order for them to operate. And so we can put additional conditions, and that is like we formalize the hours. We're making sure that they sell us that property. So those are the type of conditions. So it is, the one big thing, you're right, is the setback. I mean, that would be something typically if they came to us.
Having driven by there today and looked at it and looking at the stakes that the surveyor has put out there, the fact that they're leaving that huge amount of trees on what would be the northeast corner of that property really is, I believe, quite from a developer standpoint. I'm not cutting trees down. I'm leaving more trees than I really have to, right?
Yeah, they are. When you look at the site up here, these trees are remaining. Of course, this is that 40-foot buffer that's already there that's not going anywhere. And then when you look at back here, whoops, they are adding additional landscaping.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, Joe?
No, thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions, at this time, we'd like to hear from the developer and Conrad's team. So if someone would head that up and whatever comments you would like to make, it's all yours.
Sure. My name is Eric Turk. I represent the Conrad's group. I'd just like to take a minute and introduce the team that we have here with us today. First off, we have Jeff Serto. Jeff is our architect on the project with Smith, Davidson, and the Serto Group. Jeff has worked with us on multiple car wash projects. We have John Urbanic with us. John's a civil engineer with Rockaway Civil. Same type of situation. John has worked with us on multiple projects. And we have Mike Swigart with us also, who's the traffic engineer, which he can address that question that came up a little earlier. He's with TMS Engineers. Also with the group, Dominic Umick. Dominic Umick is our group business leader, overseeing our multiple divisions, including the car wash and our tire stores, our retail stores. And myself, my name is Eric Turk. I'm our CEO and president of the Conrad Companies. And I've been with the company about 18 years now. I thought I could just give a quick intro and then kick it over to Jeff Serto to kind of start with the site plan, and we can go from there. Dominic and I, I'm gonna repeat a little bit of what Fred said, and Fred, thank you for being so thorough and detailed with what you said. But Dominic and I work for a group or an organization of companies called the Conrad Companies. We are a local family owned business. We operate in 40 plus cities only in the state of Ohio. The five of us here today are specifically representing Blue Falls Car Wash, by Conrad's, which is a division that we have. We now have 8. We're working on building our 8th car wash at the moment. This would be the 9th. We are proposing for Blue Falls, the car wash there on the corner of State and Portage Trail Extension next to the Get-Go gas station. It is a 1.31 acre site that we'll be splitting off from about a little bit over 7 acres there that the church owns. We've been operating for over 50 years. We take great pride in our brand. We've developed our Conrad's name. And for us, when we got into this car wash situation, our businesses, we then apply that same philosophy to the car washes. So we are selling clean at this facility. The associates need to look very professional. The site needs to be clean. The landscaping needs to be clean. Building. And in addition, the cars coming out of the car wash need to have very clean quality. As Fred had mentioned, as part of this development project, we have agreed to grant the city, 10-foot area in front to help with our understanding the Portage Trail Extension road widening project that will be done here at a later year. We're assuming that'll continue on with the next properties going down. With developing any new commercial site, there's a lot of rules and code and regulations we need to follow. We meet the majority of them here. I think Fred mentioned 1 or 2 we need to talk about. But in addition to that, we want to become part of the fabric of the community. So when we were looking at the code, anything that we felt we could go beyond the code with that was abutting, maybe the residential properties in the back related to setbacks or screening, lighting, we made sure to go above and beyond so that we can be respectful to those properties. That's really, kind of the gist of what we're doing. And I'd like to turn it over to Jeff Serto to kind of start with the project.
Thanks, Eric. I'd like to thank Fred for going through the project pretty extensively. There's not a lot left to say after all of that, but this is a quality project. These materials are quality materials. The layout is something we've incorporated in 4 other locations. The site works very well in this arrangement. The circulation on this property, once you enter, we have those 3 stacking lanes. You'll actually enter the wash at the back of the property, go through the single tunnel, come out the front, and at that point you have an option of exiting or going to the vacuum stations that are provided on the west side of the property. As mentioned, we've tried to exceed most of the requirements for the site where we could, and I think we've done that. We're certainly willing to work with the city if they feel there's more buffering required at the back of the property. In regards to the few items mentioned for mitigation, the 60% stone requirement is something we're certainly open to working into this project. And we'll work with planning department on the best way to accomplish that for them. I would mention that the parking count, typically we count the vacuum parking spaces as additional parking. So in reality, on this property, we have room for 22 car parking, with 16 of those being provided with vacuum equipment. So I don't know how the board wants to look at that. If that's the requirement, I don't think a variance or modification would be required for that, but we're certainly open to talking about that. And that's really about it. I'm happy to answer any questions about the building in particular as we go through this.
Okay, is anyone else from the Conrad, would they like to speak at this time?
There
Eric,
was a-
should we have Mike address the question about the COVID-related traffic study?
I can do that. I'm Mike Schweikert with TMS Engineers. We're very, very aware of the COVID situation. We've been monitoring it ever since the governor's stay-at-home order was implemented. We've been in contact with Ohio Department of Transportation, with their engineers to determine best practices for doing forecasting of traffic volumes. And what we did was in all of our engineering for the traffic, we took a conservative approach by taking traffic counts from the Ohio Department of Transportation on Portage Trail and compared that with a count that we took, or actually counts over a week that we took on Portage Trail to determine what that impact was and what the differences were. And then we developed a calibration factor from all of that data to apply to our traffic counts to increase that to pre-COVID type conditions, so that we're forecasting the traffic conditions as if if COVID had not appeared, here and has impacted our traffic volumes. We don't know what this is going to do. We don't know if it will even come back to the previous volumes, but to be on the safe side, we want to take that conservative approach and apply the factors to our data to ensure that when we look at those impacts, that we're assured that we're making the right decisions as to what this particular development will do. We also have two choices of determining the traffic generated by the development. One is from national sources, from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. For the case of a car wash, they have very few studies, and we felt that utilizing data from an existing car wash in this area in Northeast Ohio was more appropriate. And what we did with the data from that, this was another blue car wash in Cuyahoga County, and we used the peaks from those from that car wash and applied it to this particular location. And again, to be more conservative and to look at the worst case scenario, and as well as other factors that we also felt that was important. If you look at traffic volumes on Portage Trail over the years, traffic counts really have been decreasing there for the last 13 years. But we wanted to apply a growth factor in the positive nature, so that again, taking that conservative approach, we are maybe a little overestimating the amount of traffic that's actually there. And then the state of Ohio requires us to use design hour factors to apply. So we're adding even additional traffic to accommodate things such as, school not being in session, or other special circumstances. We're really looking at the peak hour of the year in our forecast. So we know we're not going to get the very worst case scenario of the highest hour of a year, because there's over 8,000 hours in a year, but we're looking at approximately the 30th highest hour of the year as the forecast location for looking at the capacity of the roadway to be able to handle the additional traffic from the car wash. And then the results were, as Fred stated, those were our recommendations for ingress and egress that we think are appropriate for this particular use. If there's any other questions that we could answer, I'm here to answer those.
Very good. Thank you, Mike.
Ed, I have a question for Eric. It's about the sewer, or John, if they can talk a little bit about the Summit County sewer.
I will deflect that one to John.
Yeah, John Urbanic, Rockaway Civil. Fred, the end of your question broke up. It sounded like you were just looking for clarity on the correspondence and the concerns that were generated from the county. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. So as the civil engineer, part of our role in evaluating the site is verifying utility availability and what are those options for land development. It was determined that there was no sewer along the frontage of this parcel, as is typically the case. The closest sewer was a county sewer that it was at the back of the Gecko site. It's very close to our property, but it is off the project property. That sewer flows due north and routes through that residential subdivision, and ultimately ends up down in a very, very large interceptor that I think it was the Mudbrook Interceptor flowing west. Part of what we were tasked with was making certain in a capacity analysis report was that the flows generated by the car wash did not negatively impact any of those existing residences or businesses between our point of connection and that outlet into the very large interceptor. So we worked with the county Department of Sanitary Sewer Services and verified what they were looking for from a parameter standpoint in their analysis, and we performed that analysis, submitted to them in late June, like I think your report referenced, and their response was they concurred with the report. The sewers in downstream of our project site had the capacity to handle peak flow analysis by adding in the car wash. So does that clarify, Fred, what you were looking at for?
Yes.
Thank you, John. Any other questions from commissioners based on this presentation? I'm going to open it up to the commissioners unless there's any specific things. Eric, anything else you want to add, or would you?
Not at this. I guess one last thing. I'm sorry. It's just that when I was referencing, our Conrad's brand and how long we've been around, one thing we really focus on when we develop these washes is that they are state of the art. We are putting top of the line equipment in there. It is a top of the line building. We could build these for significantly less, but it is very important for us that we're offering, top of the line services like our retail locations.
Do you have an estimated cost of what these buildings and site development might be worth?
So estimated cost, if you, land, building, site development, and equipment, we're around the $4.4 million mark.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if there's no more specific questions, I'm going to close it to the applicant. Thank you. It was nicely presented. And I'm going to open it up to the commissioners for questions. At this time, Commissioner James.
Yes, sir. I do have a question about the noise. There was a noise study done because they're talking about opening their business at 7 a.m. Has there been a noise study done on the vacuuming noise? I mean, Cedar Woods Drive is going to be right behind it. And, 7 a.m. could be a little bit on the early side for some folks to start hearing noises like vacuums.
Would
So
you like to
I'll
answer?
address that. If you'd like, I'll address that.
Please.
Okay, so yes, we've done noise studies, obviously not on this particular site because the site isn't developed, but we have, as was mentioned earlier, multiple other sites identical to this, and we've had noise studies performed and decibel readings taken. On the side of that building, which is the entrance to the car wash, which is closest to the residence, the decibels at the property line are about 61.8 decibels. That's the typical generation of decibels. To give you an idea of similar noises, 60 decibels is normal conversation level. So this does not emit on that side of the building. By the way, that would be before the 40 feet of screening that's there already that was done when the development was put in, or the additional screening that we are adding and the additional fencing. The actual producers for the vacuums are at the other end of the property. One is located in the secondary tower closest to Portage Trail. The other one is located in the parking row, again, opposite of where that secondary tower is, by the ingress egress lane, if you see it on the site plan. So the noise producing is much further away. And then you only have the end of the nozzle of the vacuum that's open, and it's not audible at the property line.
Okay, very good. I'm very glad to hear that. And I also appreciate the comprehensiveness of your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner James. Commissioner Ricker.
Yes, I still would have some concerns with the traffic flow and trying to understand the studies that could be done, because, we're also going to have a new high school built off of Portage Trail there. And obviously that's not there now. So we would have a hard time projecting the traffic patterns. And it is down a little ways from than the proposed site plan. And then also secondarily, with the, I believe Mr. Turk said it was 4.4 million. There's two other car washes less than a mile away. Is the return on investment, is this really going to be a part of the Conrad's business plan for coming into the community? Do you feel?
I could address that question first.
Okay.
So, we're only looking at areas where we feel we would serve the community and do well. There are two other washes, in this what I would call 1 mile radius of where we're going to be. Like many different services, restaurants included, there are different types of washes. One of those two washes that's down a little bit of the ways is a laser wash. So it's, like a wand or a high pressure wash that goes around a certain way, doesn't touch the vehicle at all. Our model is similar maybe to the wash, which is just down the road there on State. It's a tunnel. It will be foam, brushes, and so forth will touch the vehicle, offering monthly passes. And there's no wash in the city or area with the type of technology we'll be putting in. One of those items being the belt. So when you drive into most tunnel washes, you have to drive through, metal bars, with a roller, chain and roller type car wash. That chain and roller, if you have low tire pressure, could roll right underneath it. Also, you could scratch and damage your vehicle rims and so driving in. Ours doesn't have that. It has what I would call a people mover, similar to what you see in the airport. So we kind of pull onto the track itself. They're actually designed to be self-loading. We still have an associate there to help. So I guess to summarize that is we've had third-party studies do performers on the site. We feel based on the population in Cuyahoga Falls and the 3-mile radius that we truly look at supports an additional wash into the site based on the amount of households also.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ricker, any other questions?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Perro.
The only follow-up question I had is the sanitary sewer extension and the study that's been going on as far as the capacity. Does that sanitary sewer then stop at Conrad's property line, or is there plans to extend that sanitary sewer all the way along that undeveloped parcel? And then who pays for the sanitary sewer extension? Sure.
So I'll address that if you'd like. It's our intention that it will be part of our development costs to tie into that sanitary sewer on the get-go property. We've already reached out to them. We have a verbal agreement with them to establish an easement that's going to be moving now to a formal written document once we achieve planning approval, should we achieve that. It is our intent to take that extension and take it all the way to the end of our property so that the next developed properties can tie in without having to come onto our property. From there, it'll be the future developers in terms of continuing to extend it. But as an operator, we'd like to make sure that future tie-ins aren't disruptive to our operations. And the easiest way for us to do that is just to extend it the width of our property.
Right. Okay. Good answer. Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Perro?
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Locascio.
No, I have nothing because my concerns have been addressed previously. So
Thank you, Commissioner.
good. Thank you.
Commissioner Habel.
Yes, I have a question regarding the natural or the tree growth at the far corner between the residential and get-go that is being proposed to remain. I know a lot of times when you look at something, you want to keep those trees, but has it been studied appropriately from a standpoint of grading that those trees, in fact, will be able to be maintained? Excuse me. Got a phone call. So the question is with regard to, never get a phone call. Okay. In terms of the trees, would they be able to be stay in place based on the civil work? Apologize for that.
Jeff or John, whichever one of you would be most appropriate to answer that.
John, that's probably you if you have an idea of the grading.
No, we do. We've done a preliminary, and it's a good question. Two-dimensional plans look great until you add the third dimension. So your point is well taken. Where the building is and just behind the building is sort of the high point of the lot. And then that back corner actually falls away towards that northeast corner. So more than likely where the building and the driveways are going to be will be built up a little, and all that will ultimately drain back out to the front of the lot. So it does set itself up for an existing wooded area to remain based on the preliminary evaluation of the site grading.
So I think that'd be a very important consideration, as you're proposing it, that be something that you really can do. So I appreciate the answer.
The other conversation we've had with some residents is that we are showing landscaping behind the fenced area just west of that tree line you just spoke about. And that could easily be converted to evergreens if the Planning Commission decided that they'd rather have a row of evergreens there to add more buffer and more screening.
Thank you. Commissioner Habel, any more questions?
No, that was my one specific question. I don't have any others.
Thank you. Okay. Ed Monaco here. I have some questions, some statements. One question is the existing wooded area. Are you going to sort of clean up the underbrush? And I assume that it's unkept, whereas the whole rest of the site's going to be, you know, nicely landscaped, addressed, lawned, etc. Is it in your plan to bring that area into visually acceptable? I mean, I understand it's a natural wooded area, but you know, is it going to be part of your landscaping maintenance plan, I should assume?
So I would answer that two ways for you. First is that, as you know, some of that buffer is not on our property. So we wouldn't obviously be going on to the 40 feet of buffer that's there between us and the residential property. In addition, I would share that we're going to have that fence, which is going to be blocking the visibility to anything behind what you see there, behind that white line. And thirdly, if that was something that the Planning Commission desired for us to do in terms of cleaning up that existing wooded area that is on our property but will be behind that fence, we would be open to doing that. I'm not sure of what's all there. I know I've walked back and I've seen some dead branches and so forth back there, but we could certainly clean that up. But just to reassure you, it's really not going to be visible with the fencing that's there.
Very good, thank you. And you know, I think it would be, at least in my opinion, positive to have evergreens on the small area between the residence and the fence. Even a slight mound would be also appreciative, and the planting station such that, you know, a type of evergreen that as it grows and becomes larger, it's somewhat dense and visually, acoustically would provide some level of additional control, you know, screening, acoustics, etc. I mean, since we're going to plant them, in that case, let's make them work a little harder. And I think the plan is good. My personal opinion is the way the traffic's set up, and I've read the traffic study. I thought it was well done. The queuing up, the 3 lanes, you know, you can get a lot of cars in there, and having additional setback, I think, only provides more area for cars to queue on the way out. Not that it's a massive problem. I mean, they're not all running out at once. And I think also the thing with the car wash, queue on the way in, they're stacked up. I mean, it's not a big problem. No one's exiting in mass. Like you just got out of a workout class and 35 cars are all moving out of the lot at once. That's not how it works. So I thought the traffic study was well done, and I don't see it as creating any kind of a problem. I actually feel the additional front setback that's proposed would be to the city's advantage, and I think to the property owner's advantage. As far as the parking, I would personally, my own opinion, leave it to the planning department to decide if your parking spaces where the vacuum are is actually considered real parking. If not, then I would have to say you got to add 4 more spaces. I understand it is a bit controversial. How many employees, if I might ask Eric, do you typically have during one shift or at one time that have to park on the site?
Sure. So on average, it's 3 to 5, depending on the seasonality and, you know, where you are in the week. But it's 3 to 5 associates on the site. You know, we employ maybe 10 to 11 people in general, but 3 to 5 on the site at one time.
Okay, if during a shift change, does everybody have to show up before everybody leaves? I would think that's probably the case.
The max that we would have is 5 on the site, so related to the associates. But there's really no reason for a customer really to be using the parking spaces either. Actually, in every city we've been through, the vacuums were considered parking spaces. But the only reason you would need to park there, I guess, would maybe be to walk in if you had an issue with with something, but the associates are already walking the site at that
Okay,
time.
once again, I would sort of defer to my own personal opinion to the planning department as to whether they can be considered. Otherwise, I think our regulations are straightforward. And I'm not sure that's clear. Fred, do you have a comment on that?
You know, we'll look at it. I understand. I mean, we just didn't want that all the vacuums were being used and then there wasn't enough parking for employees. But we can go over it with them. If we feel more comfortable, I guess we can count those. It's not a big deal. It's not, and probably not all the vacuums are full at any given time, so.
Very good. I also think that the building, you know, it's a substantial building for a car wash. I was surprised and impressed with it, really. I think one might consider a typical car wash. This is not. And I think the architect did a very good job on it. We do need to have our requirements met as far as whether it's stone or whatever, we have to have our veneer requirements met. I think the fact that the lighting is reduced to a 12-foot pole, it's LED lighting, it's shielded. You know, you've met a lot of requirements that would assist us in making sure that the residents behind are not adversely affected by light, noise, etc. So I think the project, with certain restrictions that have been talked about by our planning department, my personal opinion is I think you did a fairly decent job putting this together. And with that, we have no more questions from commission members. I would just like to allow at this time, before I open it up to the public for questions, the council members that are with us tonight, if they have any statements they'd like to make or questions, I'll open that up to our city council participants that are here this evening.
If you could please show me your raised hand if you do have a comment on that from council, and hopefully we can facilitate that.
Do we have any hands up, Adam?
I do not see any hands up, Mr. Chairman, from council members. We do have a couple from the public.
Okay, since there are no statements from our council members, at this time we'll close the comments from the commissioners and we'll open it up to the public. Once again, I need to remind you, state your name and address and your question, and Adam Paul will basically be running the question from his computer and asking it to the hopefully an appropriate person who can answer the question for the particular person that has asked. Adam, if you would.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Adam Paul. I'm the senior planner with the city. I'm going to talk a little bit about format. And my role tonight is to hopefully help facilitate public comment. I just want to speak in general to how we got to this setup very briefly, hopefully without taking too much of your time. And thank you all for your patience as we got to this point. Obviously, it's been a little crazy with how we were hoping to conduct business by this time of the year. Be that as it may, here we are, and so are you. So thank you for your time. The Zoom meeting format, I think it's been pretty well laid out. It was really a directive that came down from the state level, in addition to the county public health recommendations. We did get some agreement from the developer to try to hold the application until such time that we could get residents into a building to help address their concerns in a more traditional meeting format. Unfortunately, as you know, as we sit here tonight, that's not the case yet from a public health standpoint. We did try to provide this format to allow some additional participation. This hasn't really been the case or the requirement for that matter in any of the other public meetings that we've had to conduct to this point. And I'm mentioning this to those of you who have not seen them because we have some comments. about the meeting format, and understandably so. And so there were a couple of reasons why we asked for a text format for what you wanted to ask or make comment on in regards to this development. And that was, our first impression was that we were only going to be able to mute or unmute in general all of our meeting participants. And secondly, without varying levels of people's technological know-how, use of the format and participating in this way, we didn't want a bunch of overlap and drowning each other out in what was trying to be said. I think, Mr. Chairman, from what I can see, that we can invite individual comment by muting and unmuting, as based on what I've received here, that appears to be the preference. I can first give you a general rundown of the types of comments we received without the intention that that speaks to the residents' concerns or complaints at this point in full. And then read them verbatim, or I could allow you, you know, if you want to conduct the meeting in a more traditional format, to have me go along and single out the people that have left the comment for us in the chat window and call on them directly to make a comment. Then we can go back to mute to ensure that their neighbor might have an opportunity to speak. I'd also like to just mention for the residents that there was a question here, would this be saved? And yes, this meeting is being recorded. Yes, we can save the chat function and all of those concerns can be reviewed. I'd also say that in a standard meeting format, there isn't typically a lot of back and forth. You know, we've had this kind of structure where there's a presentation and then the prospective owner or developer presents something and then the commission members speak, then public comment is invited, but it's not often that you come back to the podium and then you go back and have a question from your chair and then you come back up. And so I think what I've seen is mainly about, I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 residents, but with several comments apiece. And so that's for your information as the Planning Commission as to how you want to proceed with conducting the rest of the portion of the public comment period.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I apologize for the interruption, but there is a council person who did want to speak and needs to be unmuted, Frank Stams.
Oh, well, let's hear from Councilman Stams then, and then we'll get back to Adam. Thank you, Mrs. Colavecchio. Frank, if you would.
Well, yeah, my phone has a dent in it for trying to hit the unmute button, but unfortunately, that wasn't up to me. The host had to unmute me, and I apologize for coming in after the fact, but it was my understanding that we would be unmuted when it was time to talk. I'm not familiar with the raise the hand feature of Zoom, but I do appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I certainly respect all of the members of the Planning Commission. I believe you're volunteers and you're doing what you think is best for the city of Cuyahoga Falls. And I've got a lot of respect for you. But this isn't going to be easy being the Ward 8 resident and having a number of constituents, well, let's just say not happy with the planned development. And this has nothing to do with the business owners of the car wash. I met with them along with a couple of other neighbors last week. And I was so glad that they reached out to me to have that meeting, because I think some progress was made, and at least an attempt at progress. And I certainly have a lot of respect for them and their business model and how successful they've been. But as you all know, I've got a job to do, and it's not an easy one tonight. And again, I say this with all the respect in the world, but my phone has been blowing up with the community there, my constituency, on the format of tonight's meeting. And to be honest with you, I don't blame them. I don't see this as a level playing field for the constituency to be, the community to be well represented. Certainly they don't have the same representation that everyone else has here tonight. And I just want to voice my displeasure with that. And And I know a lot of the constituency feels the same way. But having said that, we'll move on. I know it's nobody's fault because of the COVID, but I just maybe think that it could have been delayed, but that's for another time and manner. Well, let's just talk about the paperwork that I received from Mr. Guerrera, and thank you for all your work on this, but I want to point to 1133.03, the conditional uses. And here it states, item 14 is vehicle wash and detail. And the above paragraph says these uses have the potential to produce negative impacts on adjacent property. So then if we go to the criteria, the conditional use criteria, which is 1113.08, under section D, number 2, it says the use shall be designed. And I'm no lawyer, but I understand shall as it must be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate with the existing or planned character of the general facility, and will not change the essential character of the area. Just below that, number 3, the use is not hazardous or disturbing to existing or planned future neighboring uses. And I point to the use, the words, the use is not. Now, based on some of the, I guess, conversation we've had tonight, I find it hard, and I don't know if the Planning Commission is going to vote on this tonight, but I find it hard to believe that the Planning Commission could make a determination on whether to grant a certificate tonight based on some of the language that I've heard. Language such as, well, I was writing this furiously down. It says the setback is not being met. The site plan, if I may read, the site plan generally meets the project meets nearly all building setbacks. The public utilities is met except for the sanitary sewer. The question is, would it have to meet water runoff requirements? I think Mr. Guerrera says that he doesn't say that it will or it won't. We think the fencing and landscape is adequate. Is probably adequate. I don't want to insult you by going on and on and on, but there just seems to be so many things that I'm hearing and reading that don't meet the shall be designed and the use is not hazardous. I think there was a question of, I think at one point someone said about the car wash, the uses, conditional search shall be designed. You know, I'm looking through all my notes here, but I think you get the point of what I'm trying to make is I just don't know how a determination could be made for the go ahead on this development based on a lot of these things that don't fulfill the review criteria. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Councilman Stamps. I'd like to say a couple things, and then I think Mr. Guerrera can answer that. You know, for example, the landscaping, they have to meet all of our requirements, and it will be submitted in detail and reviewed. As far as the storm sewer, same situation, and I think Mr. Damazzi can even discuss that a little bit if he feels like it, but they will have to meet all the requirements in order for this project to be put forward. And as a planning commission, we have to decide if they meet the rules and regulations, of course, of our city. And Fred, would you like to comment a little bit on the councilman's,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whether it's a conditional use permit or a site plan review, there's always conditions. And those conditions, as long as we put those as conditions as the approval, then they have to meet that. So, for example, if the condition is additional evergreens, then those evergreens go in there, and then we review them when they revise the plan. So anything that the planning commission does is approved with conditions or with stipulations, and then the applicant must meet those stipulations. As for that setback, there was a reason in the conditional use permit, the planning commission could say, yes, we agree that we can change that setback. So it takes care of that condition. And one of the recommendations was that they would be no greater than 90 feet, and 90 feet would then be at that level what they want to be. So yes, as I go through the report, I am identifying items that are potential things that may not meet code requirements, but then we handle that in the conditions. It's approved with these conditions that would take care of those issues. And that's how we do everything. And this is the first step. I mean, we talk about this all the time, is that planning commission is the first step. You know, you have to meet stormwater. That's a requirement. You have to meet the landscaping code. That's a requirement. You have to meet the lighting. So these are all requirements that even if it wasn't a car wash and it was a 3,000 square foot office building, they have to meet those requirements. And so the planning commission is looking in this case are there any conditions that would make this project better? And then that's what I'm listing in those recommendations, are those conditions. And so again, we take care of that in the recommendation. And the planning commission could add additional conditions if they want.
Well, thank you for your answer. I just want to point to some of the noise that was mentioned. The noise study was done on the decimal level of the vacuums, but I noticed that there's a trash, for lack of a better word, a trash bin near the back boundary, and I don't know if there was a noise study done on that, because I don't know about any of you, but I've lived near a trash receptacle like that, and at 7 o'clock in the morning on maybe a Monday or a Saturday, that is going to be disturbing to existing or planned to existing neighborhoods. That's awfully loud, and I know that's much louder than 60 decibels.
But maybe I can address that. Frank, Eric mentioned that when he talked to you, and we can look at trying to move that. You have to put it in a place where that you can't put it in the front yard. But there may be some locations, and we can work with them to see if there could be an alternate location that it could be farther away than where it is now.
Well, I know the neighbors, but that's just one of a number of items that talk to about some of the maybe hazardous. I think something, and I can't find it in my notes here, but regarding some of the catch basins, I think the wording tonight was they may be hazardous, or I don't know, or by nature they are hazardous. So these are just a couple of items that I wanted to bring forward to the Planning Commission, because I can't help but think that if I was fortunate enough about a month ago to sit in on a Planning Commission meeting where a gentleman was putting a wonderful pool in his backyard. And there seemed to be a lot of questions concerning that pool. on a very large piece of property. And I would think that any resident that came with these, I would imagine, things, a lot of things that need to be met, would meet with some really big concerns and questions. And at this, I guess that's a perfect segue for the let the residents now talk about some of their concerns. But I thank you for your time, and I'll mute myself and listen now.
Thank you, Councilman Stamps. We appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. At this time, Adam, if you would read once again the name and address of the folks that have a question. I think based on the fact that we've sort of predetermined that that's how we're going to do it, let's try it out that way and see if we can address the public's concerns through reading their questions and addressing the appropriate person to provide an answer to those questions. So if you would, Adam.
I will, thank you. The first comment I received is from a Nesreen Klossman. She did provide her address. I need to find it. I think it was in a separate comment. It is 124 Cedar Woods. And in general, I'll just state, and I'll read this, but in general, I'll just state that most of the comments concerned several of the same issues. Certainly the way it fits into a residential area, noise and light pollution, the potential for stormwater runoff, traffic impacts, and some other various issues. And so we'll start with the comment from Ms. Klossman of 124 Cedar Woods. I'm concerned about the development of another car wash. The main concerns, she states, for the commission are a decrease in property value, noise, again, referring to the air dryer and cars idling and radios when in use there without a barrier for the winter months has come up in a couple different comments. Most importantly, the safety of a structure being built next to an active oil well, she states. She said that they've read the reports, consulted with council members, and that they're not taking into effect that the planning commission is considering items with adverse effects. Excuse me, I've got a minimal screen here to work with. Taking these items into consideration as I question what the future looks like for my family in the city, my family that quite frankly and literally helped build the city as they are prominent developers themselves. I just realized that this kind of property does not make a conducive home to a car wash. And so she goes on to express concerns that they are steps away from the rear of these properties with single families in them. We also had a comment submitted from Kimberly Key of 130 Cedar Woods Drive. She was one of a couple comments received here that expressed concern over the format in terms of submission of comments and how the public interaction is proceeding in this meeting. She wanted to know when the traffic study would be completed. I think we've talked about that. Where the additional spaces will be located, that's been asked. The staff report states the landscaping will help with sound. She's asking for further clarification and discussion about pollution and lighting from that. Explain how the development is harmonious with the residential neighborhood. There's discussion about the 40-foot buffer has not been maintained, and that what business does the planning commission forecast will be built next to the car wash? We had a separate comment from another resident about the other parcels near it and if there are any proposed development plans there. And then a statement about the oil well and statements that they had gotten from the well owner about the proximity of developing near it and safety concerns as related to it. We move down the list here. We have comments from both, I believe, John and Diane Hurley of 118 Cedar Woods Drive. Mr. Hurley too is concerned with the communication about the meeting format and how it's proceeding tonight. They have some additional comments that came in later, but it's taken me a moment to get there, so we'll come back to those. But that is John and Diane Hurley of 118 Cedar Woods Drive, and I know they had some other things to mention here, which I'll read momentarily.
Adam, let's try to address some of these comments and then we'll get on to some more.
Okay.
We're beginning to build up here. First of all, I'd like to apologize to the public, but it's very difficult under these COVID conditions to conduct a meeting that would be similar to the ones we did before this happened. But the other thing is it's not fair to property owners, developers, and the city to not have these submitters submit their projects and be handled in a timely fashion. That isn't fair either. So we're trying to compromise this, and we felt that this was one of the best ways we could do it, and we'll learn from it and we'll do our best in the future. But at this point, one of my comments is I think maybe even I'd like to extend the slight mounding area with evergreens in the back, and let's make that as widthwise as much as possible from I guess it would be east to west across the back of the property, so that we can make sure we have enough screening. And it does help. It helps visually and it helps acoustically. So if we could expand that as much as possible, I think that would be beneficial as a screening area. And would anyone from the developers team want to address some of these issues that were brought up either by Councilman Stams without repeating yourself too much, and also the residents that for example, the word hazards has come up, and I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding there. You know, it's potentially a hazard if it's not dealt with. Things like light pollution and noise pollution. If it's dealt with properly, then it should not be a hazard. Once again, final review of any sorts of plans at any levels has to meet our strict requirements, plus any additional conditions that at this point the Planning Commission will put forth on the project if voted upon and agreed upon by the majority of the Planning Commission. So if there's any other comments from the developer, you know, I'll give you an opportunity, but without repeating yourself. I mean, I think, for example, you recycle your water, you know, you're not going to run pollution out of the site. The stormwater retention must meet our requirements. It's not an if or a maybe. It will be engineered properly or it will not be approved, etc. And whatever is on the drawings, as if indeed the Planning Commission decides to vote on it and it gets approved, which is yet to be determined, that all those issues that are conditional will also have to be met as they come forward with the revised plans. So I don't know if that answers all the residents' questions, and I apologize if it doesn't, but that's what we do here. We're trying to determine as a planning commission, does this project meet the requirements of the city of Cuyahoga Falls and any additional requirements that this commission would like placed upon this project for any number of reasons to help mitigate noise pollution, light pollution, etc. So, I mean, that's our job. It's not our job to determine if we like the more car washes. That's not our job. That we're not here for that. we're here to determine if this project meets these conditional requirements for this particular property. So if Fred or anybody would like to comment further on these particular questions, but they're very difficult to go beyond, I think, what's been said. But Fred, if you have anything to add.
Nothing to add to that. There was a question, I guess, do we know what else is going there? And we don't. I mean, this property is for sale. And what usually happens is, brokers reach out to potential people and they look at sites, and then we find out about them, typically like this project. And so we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. I mean, conditions now economically aren't all that great because of the downturn in the economy due to the COVID-19. We don't know what it's going to be like, but we know what uses could go there. And it could be more retail. It could be apartments. It could be townhomes. And those are things that could go there. It could be an office building. So in this project is because it's a car wash and there are potential things that we need to control. That's why it's a conditional use permit. But one of the things that I mentioned, I shouldn't mention as an example, but the get-go, that didn't even need to go to the planning commission. It was under 8,000 square feet. They got a variance for BZA. And so that's open 24 hours. And so, there are benefits of being a conditional use permit, actually, that you can put, you could put conditions that typically you couldn't do.
Thank you, Fred. Adam, could you read some more questions? And we'll do our best to try to provide an answer for the public.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner. Go ahead.
I just have a question also that I'd like to throw out since it hasn't been addressed yet. There were more than one concern about the active oil field and any kind of impact that might have on this new property. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that to be addressed?
Maybe the civil engineer could maybe take a shot at that one.
Thank you.
Well, the civil engineer is going to defer that one back to the to the development team.
Sure. I don't know the specifics on that that well there, but I do know that we have done a phase 1 environmental on the property study. We've also done a phase 2 where we actually did borings of the property. And in that report, there was no concern on our piece of land from any hazardous or environmental conditions related to the well. Or any environmental condition, really. That's why we did it as our due diligence for us understanding what we're buying.
Was there any kind of communication between you and the oil well owners?
Well, no, there has been not yet, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that's specifically owned by the sellers of the property or if it's leased to somebody else. I'd have to figure that out. But my legal counsel is actually inquiring with the seller's legal counsel this week. I know they're going back and forth at the moment in regards to if it's even active, because someone has the rights to that underneath our piece of property. We're trying to figure out that piece. So there may be more information I can provide. I just don't have it at this time.
Okay, I think that this information though would alleviate some fears.
It related to the trash enclosure itself. We our sites, we have the service provider not come at that time. We can't tell them, hey, we would like you to only come during 10 to 2 business hours to remove, the trash itself. And, also, thinking of hazardous things, our basins are not hazardous. The chemicals are not hazardous. And in addition to the chemicals, they're actually go through a 3-part separator on our site. The chemicals are biodegradable, but they go through that, not necessarily for the chemicals, but because of the things that could come off the vehicle. like oil and so forth. The get-go next door obviously has much more hazardous type liquids and solutions. And I'm also unsure, I was trying to look it up on my Google Maps of where the trash enclosure is on the get-go property. Trying to see if I could find that. We're open to moving the trash enclosure. We specifically put it in the back so it's not an eyesore in the front for, the traffic driving by and so forth.
Very good. Thank you. Adam, if we could have some more questions, please.
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you. I'll just remind you, I've gotten a number of comments concerned with the inability to speak directly to the commission. And so if you wish to proceed in that manner, I think we have the ability to do so. Also getting some instruction to read these verbatim. So that's how I'm going to proceed. I'm going to back up to Nazreen Klossman of 124 Cedar Woods and read what she wrote at 6:14 p.m. I am concerned about the development of yet another car wash on the parcel of land adjacent to our backyard. My main concerns for the Planning Commission are as follows. A, decrease in my property value. I've seen what gets built next to a car wash and is typically a fast food restaurant. B, noise, air dryer, cars idling, radios, and light pollution with absolutely no barrier, especially in the winter months. C, most importantly, the safety of a structure being built next to an active oil well. I would like to see site plans that indicate the location of the oil well and the battery tanks as they relate to this car wash, as I believe they have to be 300 feet apart. I, like all of the residents on this street, have looked at this staff report numerous times and did not see this mentioned. We have read these reports, consulted multiple council members, reached out to the mayor with these issues, and are now depending upon our planning commission to make sure whatever gets placed on this land does not result in adverse effects on us residents. Taking these items into consideration as I question what the future looks like for my family in this city, my family that quite frankly and literally helped build this city as they are prominent developers themselves, I just realized that this kind of a property does not make a conducive home to a car wash. This is intrusive. It is causing significant disruption among the residents whose property is literally mere steps away from this and is not harmonious with the surrounding businesses and developments that we have so proudly welcomed over the past 5 or so years. Message from Kimberly Key of 130 Cedar Woods Drive at 6:16. 1. Why do the citizens not have microphone access? This format is favoring the developer because he has access to speak and we do not. 2. When will the traffic study be completed? 3. Where will the additional 4 parking spaces be located? 4. The staff report states the landscaping will help with sound. How does landscaping help with sound? What about pollution and lighting? 5. Please explain how this development is harmonious with the residential neighborhood. 6. The 40-foot buffer has not been maintained. Please speak to this. 7. What business does the Planning Commission forecast will be built next to a car wash? Number 8. There is an active and producing oil well next to the parcel proposed to be built on. The owner of the oil well states it is common sense safety hazard, that's a quote, to build next to an active well. Please tell me how this is safe and what studies have been done. Next comment from.
Two developers in this neighborhood?
I'm sorry? Was that a question to me?
Neighborhood? That's Joe on the commission. That's the second person that identified themselves as a developer.
Not as associated with this development.
No, what I was saying is that you just read a question from somebody who identified themselves as a developer. You read a previous question that says, I am a developer. So there's 2 developers there that are asking questions, or is that the same person?
I think it's from the same person. With
Okay.
the question read verbatim. Thanks.
Got it. No problem.
Comment from Rob Crano at 6:20 p.m. How is this format, Zoom chat only, sufficient in allowing us residents a voice in addressing our concerns? I formally request another venue is created to allow everyone an opportunity to speak and not only chat through a truncated message format. John Hurley, again, I believe we stated their address of 118 Cedar Woods Drive, states your communication on this issue was not forthcoming. Your email led all of us to believe that we would have a chance to discuss live the issues affecting us. This is a lie of omission by the city. Can I call in as well as my neighbors so our voices can be heard? This is absolutely ridiculous. What if Fred had to type everything he has been saying for the last 20 minutes as the meeting was going on? That's at 6:23 p.m. We have a Todd Blaine from 90 Cedar Woods Drive stated that, Fred, you showed that buffer of 40 feet. However, what you showed was the buffer on my property, as my property line goes to the bottom of the buffer hill, and all those trees are on my property. We have a second comment from Nisreen Klossman. Landscaping is non-existent in winter. I can see down State Road, Burger King, Hamid's. She's from 124 Cedar Woods Drive. Rob Crano made a comment. My concern with this development, let me state his address for our records, please, for keeping of the meeting minutes. Rob Crano, 76 Cedar Woods. My concern with this development is noise and light. The plans mention that there are sufficient landscape foliage and cover to address. This is not true. Lights will penetrate the current tree line, and noise with this setup would be very high. There's a possible there could be 60 cars waiting at one time, causing major noise. We have a comment next from John Belisai, 96 Cedar Woods Drive. What is the Cuyahoga Falls residential noise level requirement? What is the noise level of the Blue Falls car wash? Hair dryers, automatic megaphone voice vacuums. The Cedar Woods development, 40-foot buffer trees are dying. Who's responsible for replacing them? Rob Crano, submitted another comment. What will be done to address stagnant water and mosquitoes from the retention pond? John Belisai. What is the Planning Commission looking at putting on the other 3 lots? John Hurley stated there is an active oil and gas well on this same parcel of land. Dave Beck of Beck Energy, the owner of the well, spoke to me late this afternoon and stated that this is a common sense safety issue not to have construction nor an abundance of vehicular traffic on the same parcel of land. I met with Eric Turk on Friday, who stated that there will be 3 lanes accommodating 10 cars each with a tunnel accommodating 15 cars in a glass tunnel with 16 vacuum stations and 10 parking spaces. Speak to the noise, odor, traffic, emissions, radios directly behind our homes. John Hurley also asks, has the Planning Commission reached out to Beck Energy to discuss potential safety hazards? Another comment from Rob Crano. How is this a fair format when the developer has the right to speak, but we as the residents have no voice in this? Very disappointed in our city. I now know my vote is not valued in this city. John Hurley. What noise studies have been performed to allow for, quote, comfort and general welfare, unquote, of the residents adjacent to this project as cited in the code just cited? The discussed setback will not be successful accommodating this issue. Mr. Hurley states the buildings to the near east and west of this site consist of various components of bricks and stone. These office buildings do not typically have hours from 6 to 8, or excuse me, yes, his comment says these office buildings do not typically have hours from 6 to 8 with the exception of the get-go. The presence of a lit tunnel is not congruent with this area. We have another comment from Nisreen Klossman. Can you please explain how I, a taxpayer, cannot speak on this meeting with a microphone, but the developer, not a local taxpayer, has this capability? How is this affording us the same platform to voice our concerns? We have read these reports ad nauseum. Time to discuss. Another comment from Mr. Blaine. When the water backs up into my basement, my homeowner's insurance will not pay for it. Who will be responsible if it backs up? Another comment from Mr. Hurley. This, in fact, from Diane Hurley. A lit glass tunnel with 16 blue vacuums does not, quote, emphasize the character of the general area and de-emphasize the presence of the conditional use. She then states, or asks rather, what studies have been performed that establish noise reduction from landscaping? Diane Hurley then asks, does the plan for widening Portage Trail include concern for excessive concentration of emissions? If yes, how would it be reasonable to consider emissions from cars in the queue not being excessive for the adjacent residents? Mr. Klossman states trees die in the winter. John Hurley says, in spite of all this talk of adequate setbacks, we live here. The noise is clearly audible from Portage Trail vehicles. The thought that a successful car wash will not markedly and negatively impact the enjoyment of our yards and quote comfort and general welfare is simply not possible. Comment from Mr. Blaine to Commissioner Perot. There are very little trees in that corner that is on that property. They already took out several trees to make it a parcel. Ms. Klossman states traffic has not decreased. 13 years ago, Portage Crossing was not built. Mr. Crano asks if all messages on this chat being recorded to show what the residents are saying. The answer is yes. Mr. Hurley, Diane Hurley, please forgive me and disregard my previous comment if I am eventually able to speak. That appears unclear at this time. I'm sorry. Mr. Blaine questions traffic decreasing. I employ all of you to try to get out of Cedar Hill between 5 and 7 p.m. turning left. States you are highly misinformed on your study, sir, and data, sir. Mr. Crano, how will this sewer be connected without tearing down the trees adjacent to the get-go? Ms. Klossman, the air dryer is significantly louder than the vacuums. Mr. Hurley, the answer regarding the noise is simply not possible. You cannot have operating dryers, vehicles, and vacuums to be so quiet. Also, even decibels equivalent to an uninvited conversion would be most unpleasant. Mr. Blaine states that sewer will have to remove those trees in that corner to Commissioner Mr. Perot. John Hurley is the name from the screen again. It's Diane Hurley with a comment. Diane, will the number of new employees at your site significantly impact the economy of the city? Mr. Blaine, I think in a reaction to a comment heard through the course of the meeting stated, however, you had a survey go onto my property that I had to remove. That's from 90 Cedar Woods Drive, Mr. Blaine. John Hurley, the queuing area might be good for Portage Trail, but certainly less for the residents. Mr. Blaine asks, what is the stormwater management plan for this property? John Hurley employs me to allow them to speak live. Mr. Blaine states in order to tie into the sewer, do the trees in that corner have to be removed? Mr. Hurley again addresses this to me, to Adam. This reading of comments is not doing justice to our concerns and desire to speak. Mr. Blaine, there is not a dense barrier behind my house as the trees have a disease. We already see through them and see the church as well as all the lights and noise. How is this going to be addressed? Todd Blaine, 90 Cedar Woods Drive. Rob Crano of 76 Cedar Woods Drive asks, what is the decibel level of up to 60 cars with possibly loud mufflers and stereos? John Hurley asks that we please allow the residents to speak, that there are only about 6 of them. In all due respect, to please unmute them and to please speak up to the commission on this, which I think I've hopefully addressed with them and asked on more than one occasion. Ms. Klossman asks, can someone please address the oil well? We are not discussing the amount of car washes. Mr. Blaine asks, during other meetings, we are in an open forum and able to speak and ask our questions. Why are we not able to do this? Rob Crano, 76 Cedar Woods Drive, unmute us to speak. We should have this right. This is unfair to not have a voice. We are being restricted to speak on behalf of the residents.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to, again, I apologize for the interruption, but I think what's happening here is with the comments continue to be read is that because the residents can't be unmuted and speak, they're just continuing to make comment after comment after comment, and we'll be reading comments till midnight. I would ask you as the chair to make a decision on whether Adam can just simply unmute them and then they can raise their hand. There aren't many residents on the call here at all tonight, and let them make some comments and make them have some questions. I think we'll probably get through that a lot quicker than listening to the reading of comments.
Thank you, Diane. What we'll do, one of the reasons we set it up this way is we expected a very large group, and it's difficult for our technology to accommodate that. If that's not the case, then I will allow that, and we'll go back to a format of no more than 3 minutes. State your name and address, and I'll ask you to please consider the fact that there's a lot of repeats of questions. We will give you the opportunity to speak, and it is fair and it is appropriate. We weren't trying to deprive the public of that. We were just trying to physically, technically figure it out. So if that's the case, Adam, let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to limit the speakers to 3 minutes. And I ask you please to do that. And then state your name and address. And let's go ahead and do it. Adam, you're in control.
Okay, Gene's iPad.
There.
Oh, are we unmuted?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
John Farren, AC 2830 State Road, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. Hi, Fred. Hi, everybody. The comments that have been made are very highly intellectually thought out. Oil wells are a hazard. I own 5. I know I was not allowed to build buildings near them, anywhere that close to them. I had to have firewalls, all kinds of protection. My property abuts this property. My southeast corner abuts their northwest corner. Where the two properties come together, there is a deep pit hole in my property that's the lowest spot in the entire area. It has a manhole in it. That property fills up with water all the time. I don't complain about it. I'm a contractor and a developer myself. But I realize the burden of that, which will probably be enhanced with more water and more flooding as this project develops. I don't know how you're going to address that, but some engineer ought to look at it. The other thing is the cost of the sewer. When I moved here in 1965, we had to put a sewer and water in this property. We paid for it ourselves. Now the sewer problem, as you all know, this is no man's land for sewer, Northampton, Cuyahoga Falls, and Summit County. So the addressing of that sewer, is the city going to pay for that or is the developer going to pay for that? That is a specific question. Number 2, the water extension. Is the city going to pay for that or is the developer going to pay for that? Number 3, is adjusting the traffic lane on Portage Trail going to be paid for by the developer or the city? The end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Fred, could you answer some of those questions?
The city is not paying for the sewer extension, the water line extension, or any road improvements that are not included in our street project.
Thank you.
Regarding the oil well comments, I think we've addressed that earlier. We will investigate that and determine whether that is a hazard or not. Nothing has been indicated to us at this time, but as Eric acknowledged earlier, we'll have to do some more research on that to confirm. Regarding the deep pit with the manhole on it that fills with water, now that you've made us aware of that, our civil engineer can take that into consideration when he's doing the final development and plans for the site.
I just like to add is the city, the state of Ohio controls all oil well setbacks. Cities have no jurisdiction in that. And if an oil well would derail this project, it would be up to what the state regulations are, and we have nothing to do with it.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm Tony DeMasi, city engineer. If I could just expand a little bit on what Fred said about the turning lane extension. We've all heard about the project on Portage Trail, the widening project, and that part of that project is adding that center turn lane. That project is in design right now and won't be in construction until 2023 and won't be complete until 2024. And so if the traffic report said that the left turn lane was needed at opening day of the facility, then that would need to be something that's built this year, next year, whenever the facility opens by the developer.
Thank you, Mr. DeMasi. Okay, hopefully we've attempted to answer some questions. Let's take another public speaker, please.
Yes, I see a Mr. Bill Segfirth. I'll be unmuting you momentarily, sir.
Am I on?
You are on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for making this decision, and I will be very brief. First of all, I want to address the.
I need to have your address, please.
Pardon me?
Can I have your address, please?
82 Cedar Woods Drive, and my property is directly behind the landscaping and the stormwater basin, directly behind it. I want to address, first of all, since the issue of the get-go came up, let's keep in mind that that get-go is not the first development on that property. That there had been a Sunoco gas station there for years. That many of us moved into this neighborhood and built our homes knowing that that establishment was on the corner. Now, I more or less look at that get-go as the gauntlet between that property and Cuyahoga Street, down where the gas station is on Cuyahoga Street. If you look at all the property between the get-go and Cuyahoga Street or Northampton, whichever you want to call it, Akron versus Falls, this car wash does not fit in under number 2. It is not harmonious and does not fit in that area. There are businesses, to be sure, along those areas, but they are not the kind of businesses that will draw the kind of attention that a car wash and a gas station will. And I respectfully disagree with the commissioner who thought it was a pretty attractive building. I personally think in that setting, it would be loud and gaudy. My other big concern, it's been echoed by other people who have written comments to you tonight, is that rear buffer area. Let's keep in mind that rear buffer area, our property, which is the mound that runs the length of almost the entire length of Cedar Woods Drive. When those parcels were parceled off and sold, the developers planted 2 rows of pine trees, blue spruces, which were the wrong kind of trees to plant there anyway, because typically blue spruces, as they age, die from the bottom up. And if any of you have taken time to look at that mound and the growth on that mound, particularly those blue spruce trees, you'll see that many of them are bare 1/3 to halfway up. That provides no barrier at all. So we're losing the barrier that the developers put in when they parceled off the land. The other growth that is there is wild growth that, as one of the writers already mentioned, it loses all its leaves, so that from the fall to the following spring, you get a clear view. If you for me, for example, I have a deck out back. If I'm standing on my deck, I can see over the top of that mound, right over to the church, and hear and see all the traffic. So I'm not sure what kind of plantings you're talking about putting at the base of that mound. They look like bushes to me. As far as I'm concerned, as a sight or sound barrier, those would be useless. And my last question is, and I don't know if this can be answered now or not, are there any plans to put a tire center next to the car wash? Because I know there are some car washes you have that have a tire center next to them. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. Would the developer comment about the question about the tire center?
Yes, there are no plans to put a tire store there. We have a long-standing relationship with Goodyear, and there is a Goodyear store very close to the proximity of this corner. So we have decided to move away from that situation.
Very good. Thank you.
In regards to the buffer in the back, we're absolutely willing to change that landscaping to a mound with evergreens. And I just want to reiterate that there is also a fence that is in front of that also, that would be blocking the noise and helping that situation.
Very good. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Stigford. Would the next public speaker, please?
We have a Rob Crano with a hand raised. And if you're unfamiliar with the use of these functions in Zoom, you can select that, through one of the menus. There's a hand you can click that would go blue. You could also make a civil gesture to the camera you're in front of if you wish to get somebody's attention over here. And hopefully we can address it in that way. But I see one for Rob Crano. I am unmuting his microphone as we speak. Thank you.
Hi, I think everyone can hear me now. I want to first of all thank you for listening to our comments at least enough to allow us to speak. That gives us a great opportunity to at least voice our opinion, and I think that was one of our major concerns. As I look at this development that is occurring, I should mention my name is Rob Crano, 76 Cedar Woods Drive. I apologize. My property is directly behind where this development is occurring, and as my neighbors have specified, that cover is not going to work in any way regarding the light pollution due to those trees that we have and the ground cover that dies all winter long. So I appreciate you addressing the issues of the light by building up the trees. I think a bigger concern of mine, however, is sound. I'm already dealing with a get-go that is over there, and yes, it's loud, and it was there as I moved into this property. So I expected that. I understood that. I was willing to put my hard-earned dollars into purchasing this house for my family with that particular place directly behind me, and understood the sounds that were coming out of there. All night long, we hear cars. All night long, we hear elements and motorcycles driving through their loud stereos. This development is just going to increase that sound. Based off of what I can see from the schematics, you can fit upwards of 60 cars within this space if all facilities were used. While I understand that that's extreme and it probably wouldn't be 60 cars at one time, all it takes is a number of cars to create additional sound within that space. So evergreen trees are great. They might help to block out some of the light pollution that's going to occur. It's not going to stop the sound. I mean, we're already dealing with that quite frequently with gecko. It's just going to increase. I'm frustrated by the thought that we even think that this is harmonious within our neighborhood, that our zoning and planning commission would feel that this is harmonious within the plans. By definition, it is not. It's not. It's not going to. It doesn't draw any appeal to this area. We have over 400 residents who have signed a petition stating that they don't want this here. I mean, that in itself should say something. I know that they're not all able to join this call. I think that this format is still very restrictive. I do appreciate you again allowing us to speak, however. But when I look at the studies that are done, the connection point to the sewer, my understanding is that's going to go directly through that small batch of trees that are expected to be kept. How do you build a sewer that's going to go across the line to get-go and keep those trees in place? Those trees being right in my own backyard. So I know that's not my property, not my say, but I don't feel it's conducive to the environment. I don't feel that those trees will remain. I think it's a way for the information to be shared and hopefully, build their property because I don't think those trees will be able to remain at the end of this. So please tell me if I'm wrong, if you have different plans on how to facilitate the sewer line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crano, for your comments. Would the civil engineer comment a little bit about the amount of space needed to put in that sewer line? And it's indeed prohibitive, or will you replant trees afterwards? Any comments at all to that effect?
Sure, much like the question was brought up earlier about grading in that area of trees and would the grading impact how much to remain? The question of utility installation is another valid one. The final layout of the sewer connection from the sewer, just onto the gecko property, extending west to the western edge of the project parcel has yet to be determined. How it's routed through there, how specific trees are located and potentially avoided. We have some flexibility on how to get that sewer through there. That being said, constructing a sewer through or around the wooded area will result in some portion of that being eliminated. And then I'm sure, much like if that were the case, I think I could speak for the applicant in saying that much like they're willing to work with the landscaping elsewhere on the northern buffer, they would be willing to supplement whatever is cleared with additional landscaping after the fact.
Thank you. We have the next speaker, please.
Can I
Mr.
address
Blaine
a
raise
couple of
his
the
hand.
questions that were brought up?
Yes,
Can I address a couple of the other questions that Mr. Crano brought up?
please do.
Mr. Crano, thank you for your comments. First of all, I'd like to share with you in terms of light pollution, the city of Cuyahoga Falls, as in most cities that we develop in, have a requirement that the light from our structures do not escape the property. Things like diffusers are used to push that light back onto our property, and that is the way that light will not escape from that property. Relative to the noise that you asked about, the noise studies that we had conducted were conducted at operating hours from 7:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. And the decibels that I quoted earlier in this meeting at 61.8 at the rear property line before any screening was fully operating the wash all day long with vacuums and the entrance to the wash and so forth. The screening, as we said earlier, we're very open to putting the most dense screening that we can that the Planning Commission would like. If that's evergreens thickened up through there, we'd be more than willing to do that to address that. So I just wanted to reassure you that the noise study is comprehensive and done during operating hours. The light will not be an issue because of the city's codes. And then our willingness to do aggressive additional evergreen plantings to help offset the condition of the original 40-foot barrier.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please. Adam.
I saw Mr. Blaine raise his hand to the video. I see that Mr. Stams has his in the Zoom chat window, as does Mr. John Hurley. And so I'm going to go to Mr. Blaine now and then Mr. Hurley after him.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate you taking the time and listening to our voices and letting us be unmuted so that we can have this forum and open discussion. I will try to keep my time short and quick as other people have already addressed some of my questions and concerns.
Can you state your address,
I'm sorry, 90 Cedar Woods Drive.
Thank you.
My property will be is located right at the corner there of the proposed storm drainage, that kind of area. I didn't hear the discussion of the storm management plan for this property and for the car wash itself. My main concern is stormwater runoff, as I know that back property behind it, that parcel that is being purchased, does get very wet and very damp, so much so that the church cannot mow that property until it's probably close to almost knee length, just because of the amount of rain that we do get in the spring. So I want to have that addressed. I also want to know if there's going to be a pump that needs to be used for the sewer in order for it to be not only connected, but does it need to be a pump to pump, east of the property to be tied in. And then my last question that I do have is, I know that we addressed, there's a fence now that is being put up on behind the property. I think that will address some of the lighting issues. I do appreciate that being added into that. But like as a previous concern, I know that Mr. Guerrera, you pointed out that buffer behind our property it is good enough and is overgrown. Well, again, like said before, again.
Oh.
We lost him.
Oh.
Well, I think we get the gist. I hope there wasn't a lot of additional comments that you were wanting to make, sir, but we lost you. But I will, to answer some of those questions, I'll refer to the developers team if someone would restate some of those concerns about the stormwater and the sanitary sewer.
Yeah, I'll take the sanitary sewer question first. The evaluation that we've done on the depth of the sewer at the proposed connection point will not require a pump. So that was the one question about pumping sanitary sewage. There was another general question about stormwater and drainage, and the state design codes and local design codes are so stringent, as they should be, relative to stormwater management. This particular property happens to fall within a district which the city of Cuyahoga Falls has designated as a sensitive area due to its location within the Mudbrook watershed. So this then has another level of stormwater management requirements to it. And Mr. DeMasi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can say for certain that the amount of stormwater management, both water quality and flood control or detention that'll end up in this property will exceed what's typical for a development like this, because it happens to be within this area deemed sensitive by the city of Cuyahoga Falls. So there will more than likely be multiple shallow dry basins around the property, as shown on the schematic site plan, that will accommodate the stormwater management design.
Thank you. Adam, let's have the next speaker.
Go to Mr. and Mrs. Hurley.
Thank you, Planning Commission. Our address is 118 Cedar Woods Drive. And I just had one comment. Was the sound study referenced by Dominic done by an outside service or by themselves? And also he mentioned 61.8 decibels. But what is that? How did that figure come about? Was that an average, or whatever? Because obviously there could be times where it would be quite loud and times where it could be very quiet. I just wanted him to speak to that. Also, just for Mr. Crano wanted us to just address if that water basin does, have water in it for periods of time. He was concerned about mosquitoes having children and young kids on his property. I just wanted to say too, my wife would like to speak after I'm done, and I just wanted to touch on that sound study.
Mrs. Hurley, if you'd like to comment, please.
Okay, do I have to give my address again? No. Okay, I just wanted to follow. Thank you very much for letting us speak. We do appreciate you, Diana, interrupting that and allowing us to speak. I'm just trying to work within the code, and I'm going to bring it up again because it concerns me a lot. I know, Fred, that you said that it went towards the state's jurisdiction as far as oil wells. Dave Beck from Beck Energy was very concerned and said, I am emphatically telling you that common sense safety issue to have that type of vehicular traffic and construction on that same parcel of land. And again, I know that you're going to have to do a study to ensure our safety, but I'm just going by the planning commission or the development department of the city saying the protection of the health, safety, comfort, prosperity of the community's inhabitants. We live right here. It made us just very concerned to hear that. I know you said that it had to be under this jurisdiction of the state, but again, as the planning commission and what your mission is, I would hope that that would be to our, addressed to our satisfaction. I know we talked about a traffic study, and I know that everyone was concerned about the traffic. Again, I obviously am concerned about that, but what I'm more concerned about, when we spoke with Mr. Turk last week, and I know you want to be successful or you wouldn't be opening in this area, and you're allowing 3 lanes of queuing accommodating 10 cars each. The large, long tunnel, you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, could accommodate up to 15 cars. And then the vacuums, there's 16 spaces. Now, I know that you said at peak times, it could be 32 cars, you know, whatever, but the best laid plans of mice and men, right? The reality of it could be that there are a lot of times, again, you want to be successful there, that it's going to be loaded with cars. Again, I don't know. I would just like to see a noise study. I know it could be within a decibel level, but like John said, intermittently, it could be high. We all live in our backyards. We know that it will be a nuisance, and it will not be harmonious with the emissions, with the noise, with car radios, and perhaps a loudspeaker if you have one, perhaps the dryers. I know they're state of the art, but I don't know how quiet they are, and the vacuums. So that is a huge concern of ours, and I would like that to be answered in a study that would be quite objective. Speaking of the harmony of the area, I'm just coming up from the valley, and I am seeing the developments on that corridor. There is the new SUMA building, which is a brick building, Portage View East or West, which is the new development with the law offices. Then you have the Portage Bluff. Then you go beyond that, you had Get-Go, which is brick, Market District, which is brick. Everything is very understated, including Portage Crossing. And the building of Conrad's is quite a spectacular looking building, but it is not harmonious with our area. Coming from the west, you will view a long glass tunnel that will be lit up at dusk, or it will be lit up at different times. There is 16 bright blue vacuums and a bright blue roof. This is not harmonious with the area. And according to what I can understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, conditional use should be more, it doesn't stick out. It isn't emphasized. It's more inconspicuous, if you would. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but that will stick out like a sore thumb. I just feel like with the noise, the safety, the harmony with the area, it'll be disturbing. It'll create some adverse effects for us as residents. And I feel like the negative impact on us will greatly outweigh the economic. I mean, I know they're going to be paying some property taxes, but there are 6 car washes in a 2-mile radius. It will be a wash, probably, taking business from other car washes. And then there's going to be 3 to 6 employees. So it's not going to be a highly employed place that will be bringing in a lot of, and I just wanted to say that, and I thank you for allowing me to talk. Thank you for unmuting us.
I didn't take 3 minutes. I just wanted to say one last thing. I wanted to thank the council persons that came and actually visited the site. I want to express to the commission that it is remarkably intimate, just the space there between where our homes are, the land, and even Portage Trail. And to think that this wouldn't have some sound impacts that would really disrupt the enjoyment of our properties is just, it's almost not even close to being reasonable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Curley, thank you for your comments. Would the developer like to address some of these questions, please?
So I'll go first. Mr. Hurley, thank you for your comments. And Mrs. Hurley, thank you. Yes, it was a third-party professional firm, HCW, out of Minter, Ohio, that performed the noise study that I referenced. Yes, it was done while we were fully operational. So it took into account all of the different noise emitting factors, whether that be cars waiting in the stacking lanes, whether that be vacuums being used, whether that be the dryers that are at the facility. It encompassed all that. To answer your specific question, yes, 61.8 was the average. We had a low of 53 and a high of 64 in that 12-hour time period of that operation. The water basin issue, John, I would leave that to you to address, if you would. I think we've already spoken to the oil well issue that we'll need to do that research and confirm. And obviously, the state will dictate that particular element.
Yeah, the stormwater basin, another good question, and it seems to always come up at these planning type meetings, the effect of standing water and mosquitoes, or the concerns of standing water and mosquitoes. The basin will be a dry basin. The basin is designed to fill up with water during heavy periods of rain and slowly release that water in a managed amount or a managed flow. So for a period of time, for 24 to 48 hours after a storm event or multiple storm events, there could be, 6 inches, 2 feet, whatever the basin ends up being designed for. There could be a bit of water in it, but the ultimate goal is for it to be freely draining and empty. I can say with confidence, and again, with this particular applicant, I think I heard Eric mention it earlier, they some reference to clean. The landscaping and the level of maintenance that's done on a weekly basis throughout the year is at the high level for what we see on a lot of commercial properties. That includes the basin and the plantings in and around the basin. So we have a lot of projects we do where the basin's in the back corner and it gets neglected. That doesn't, based on my history with these projects with Conrad's and Blue Falls, that doesn't seem to be the case. So the landscaping that's done in and around these basins on a regular basis, picking up debris, keeping the grass down, things like that, tending to the landscape beds, that gets done on a regular basis. So I hope that answers the question about water, storm water in the basins and the condition of the basins.
Dominic, could you comment on the type of roof that we have along with where the dryers are in the facility?
So the roof is actually not a blue roof. What you might have been referring to, Mrs. Hurley, is there is a blue trim facing that goes around the roof line, but the roof itself is actually translucent and it's an opaque type white, so that it's energy efficient and allows a lot of light into the facility. But itself is not a colored roof. There's a blue band around it. That's the facing of the side where gutters and so forth are stored. The dryers for the vehicles are at the Portage Trail end of the building. So that noise of the blowers is actually muted and it is equivalent to the road traffic that goes by. So that's the location of the dryers.
And they're in the building.
Inside the building, yes.
I just like to address the question about conditions for design. That is a condition. The planning commission could say we want brick instead of stone. It's not in a location where we have design guidelines, but you could put some conditions on the color of brick or stone. The code says 60% has to be hard surface, but that is an item that could be a condition.
Thank you, Fred. Adam, if you would, the next speaker.
Yes, I see that Mr. Stams has his hand raised. There's a Chris Donatelli who is showing to the screen and he's got his hand raised. I'll go to Mr. Stams if he wishes to defer for a moment for the resident to speak, then we can go to Mr. Donatelli.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I had my hand raised earlier, probably an hour ago, hoping that the constituents would be able to have the format they have now. So I'll just turn it over to you in the ward.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Chris Donatelli.
That's my wife. My name is John.
You're unmuted? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. My name is John Donatelli, and I live on 70 Cedar Woods. And I'm not going to repeat what my next door, Robert Coreno, said, but I lived here for 19 years. And I'm the only neighbor that I had to deal with Gecko. I'm right behind the Gecko station, okay? When I work with the city and I work with Gecko, I got whatever I wanted. I got the fence, they put the trees up. I had extra trees. Let me tell you what, It's beautiful. The fence is there. The trees are there. But 5 o'clock in the morning, when the rubbish truck comes in, you can hear that big boom every morning. The noise is there. The cars are there. And as I told Gecko, yeah, I go for it. You got to give me my privacy back. After 6 years, I have my privacy. But let me tell you, you know, the lighting, the noise, the cars, I mean, it's a different story. And then someone made a statement about the traffic on Portage Trail is diminishing. That's not true. I've been here, 19 years, and that's really hard to get out of Cedar Hill. Most of the time, I have to go to Cross Creek, to the light. But 6, 7 years ago, I even was petitioned to get a light at Cedar Hill, and now we can get one. So, the fences are okay, your trees are okay, but your noise, your traffic, it's not going to go away. That's all I have to say. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there another speaker, Adam?
We have Councilman Russ Balthus has his hand raised. I'll unmute that account now.
Thank you, Adam. Can everybody hear me?
Just barely.
Barely.
First, I just want to thank the Planning Commission for allowing everybody to speak. I think that's really important. And I do have one question for the developer. I was curious, how many sites do you currently operate? And of those sites, how many border a residential area? And that could be an estimate. And could you let us know what, if any, are the most common complaints that you get from residents who own property next to residential areas that own property next to your facilities? And what processes do you have in place to address those complaints? And what's your strategy or policy in handling those complaints? Thank you.
Dominic, you want to take that one with the locations?
Yeah, sure. So I think as Eric mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of building our fourth tunnel wash like this. The other three all abut residential properties. Our Amherst location has an apartment complex that's directly behind us. Our Strongsville and North Olmsted location have residential properties that run off of the corners of each one of those properties. I supplied, I think it was 10 or 12 city references to Mr. Guerra and Mr. Stams that were from cities that we have done business in for many years that speak to whether we have been a nuisance or not, either on the property, the maintenance of the property, or nuisance to the neighbors with car traffic or car noise. And I think they could share with you that those references are all very, very favorable and strong. Like any business that's been in business for 50 years, have we ever had an issue that's been raised by a resident? Absolutely. Unlike a lot of other businesses, office buildings and so forth have been mentioned, our customer base is the community. It is the residents who live in the area. So we are hypersensitive to being responsive when those things are brought up, because those are the very folks that we're looking to serve. If something's brought to our attention, as simple as a flag that is worn out and the operator of the store hasn't noticed that the flag is getting frayed on the end, we fielded those calls and we respond to those and we get those things resolved immediately. We have a bush that's dying that maybe is unattractive to the neighbor. It gets reported to us. We address that. We get the landscaping team out there. That dying bush is removed and it's replanted. I guess the best testament I can give to you is the reputation that we have with the cities that we've operated in for years and years.
Very good. Thank you. Adam, any more speakers?
I see Mr. Hurley or Mrs. Hurley has also raised their hand, I think, for a return comment, and we can get to that. I want to make sure that I believe, aside from two people who sent chat comments that we've heard from the residents who did submit, but if you do wish to, please try to let us know and we'll make sure you get an opportunity to speak here. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Mr. Hurley's account.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I had forgotten to say this. I know I appreciate Russ's question to them regarding residential areas. We did Google Earth those. I know that one of our residents went out to the Strongsville location. I don't know if any exactly replicate the city of Cuyahoga Falls, but I would like to just say we are the residents of Cuyahoga Falls, regardless if they've had comments in the past. I know you've been in business for 50 years, but according to what I had read, your car wash business is fairly new, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that these locations are on areas like Pearl Road, Lorraine Road, Royalton Road. These are a different type of community than where you're moving into, and frankly, the look and the single family dwellings behind this property. I know that I was looking in cleveland.com, and just a year ago when you opened that North Olmsted property, Wally Hill, that business development manager from Conrad, was excited about being there. And he said the new technology, the car wash, can wash upward of 160 cars an hour. And that frightened me, quite honestly, being a resident behind that. And I know you have a successful car wash business. And when I read that it could wash upward of 160 cars per hour, as a resident, with all the concerns we previously stated, I just wanted to put that out there. But thank you for letting me talk. That's the only comment I had to make. Thank you.
Hurley, would the developer like to address those questions?
Sure. Yes, Mr. Hurley, that is absolutely correct. The car wash has the capacity to do that quantity of cars in an hour, although it does not rarely reach that level. Car washes, I'm sure most of you know, have their peak days in the wintertime after there's been a snow event and a lot of salt has been on the road. That's typically when you see those washes busy. That represents about 5 to 7% of our days that are that level of business. The traffic study and the information that we provided shows that, on a typical peak hour, we're at 59 cars in the afternoon, as low as 32 in the morning peak hours. Relative to that quantity of cars, that's what makes this wash unique. It's the people mover belt that Eric spoke about earlier that allows us not to have the vehicle stacking problems that you see in a lot of other car washes. So yes, it keeps the cars moving and flowing. Our customers like that. They can be in the car, they can be in their car and through the wash in 5 or 10 minutes in most busy days. So it's more of an advantage to the stacking than something that we regularly. There may be 5% of the days where we have peak business levels.
Thank you. Adam, are there any other speakers?
Yes, we do have the hand raised from Ms. Clausman. I'll unmute that account now.
Thank you, Adam. And you covered a lot of what I had asked because you read mine verbatim, so I appreciate that. But I just really wanted to speak, especially to the Planning Commission, because I think that there might be a misunderstanding that because this is on our property, this is what we're upset about. We're not on our property, it abuts our property. And oh, for the record, I'm at 124 Cedarwood, so I apologize. But I just want to be clear, we have been very supportive of the development of Cuyahoga Falls. When I grew up here, and this whole area was a pile of rubble for over a decade. I absolutely love that we live here. I love what has been built up. I am so pro-development, I can't even tell you. That's not the issue at hand. And I think everyone's hit the nail on the head with all of our points in terms of the harmonious features and concerns about sewer and oil, etc. I just want to make it clear that it's not well, something's going to get developed there, so you already know this is going to be a car wash kind of situation. That's not what we're arguing. And so I just want to make that point clear. We are very much for the development and build up of our city. We just feel like this isn't the right fit, and because of those aforementioned issues. So that's all I just wanted to say, just so that we can keep it clear on the table. It's not that something's going up right behind our property. We're really taking into consideration the planning commission conditional use certificate and trying to see how this meets those standards and addressing our concerns. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you. Adam, another speaker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Walters. Would like to make a comment at this time.
Welcome comments from Mayor Walters.
Thank you. I kept getting muted for some reason, but a couple things I just wanted to mention. First of all, thank you for residents for coming on tonight on Zoom. This is not our first choice of a format, believe me. I was on the phone this morning, even with Donna Skota from Summit County Health, and also we deal with the governor quite a bit. And we're not allowed to have a live meeting, but I've been pushing. I know Diana Koloveco will tell you that I knew we had to find a way, but we were not allowed. So unfortunately, this was our best format. But I want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. I'm hoping in the future, when it gets to city council committees or even city council for that matter, we can have a live meeting. But again, that's not up to us. So we'll listen to the professionals. So I just wanted to let everyone know this is not the way we like to do business, but it was our only choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Adam, any other speakers?
Yeah, I think Mr. Blaine made his way back in, and so we're going to try to get back to him after he froze up on us. Just a moment.
Yes, sorry, Planning Commission. I apologize for that. I just wanted to say thank you. I did go on YouTube and you addressed my answers, or you answered all my questions. If you could, I just wanted to say thank you for all that. And thank you for listening to us and having our voice. I appreciate you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Blaine. We appreciate those. Adam, any more speakers?
I'm going to scroll through this just one more time to ensure I haven't missed anything. I don't believe I see anybody else making a request to speak at this time.
Okay, well, I hope we allowed everyone that was interested in speaking. And I apologize. I want to thank Diane Colavecchio for pointing out the fact that probably should have done that right up front. We were just trying to keep format, but it was obvious that hearing from the public was the right thing to do. And we'll try to continue to do that as much as we can if we have to go through this format. So thank you all for your comments and taking the time to get involved, and hopefully you understand why we have to do what we have to do with these Zoom meetings. We'd love to meet in person, but it's just not the safe thing to do or the legal thing to do right now. So thank you all very much for your comments. And with that, I'll close the public portion of the meeting. And at this time, if there are any further comments from commissioners, I'll allow those questions. If not, I'll ask if there's a motion from the commission for this project. And Adam or Fred, would you put up?
Yes, I'm trying to do that now. As we always do, we give a sample planning commission motion based on our recommendations as a basis for what you want to do. And so I just put that up there.
Okay, at this time, I'll ask if there's a motion from the planning commission for this project. Okay, well,
before we make that motion, I guess from hearing from some of the things that the public has said, I kind of have a few questions. I don't know if that's.
Well, here's what I would like to do, Rob. If if we can get a motion in a second before voting, we'll open for discussion. And we can continue to ask questions or whatever. Or if you prefer, you can ask your question now.
Well, I would prefer to ask the question because I'd like to hear from the developers.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Just a couple things. You know, I'm sure we're all on Google Earth looking at this thing, which I've been doing. And a lot of the development work I've done as an architect, I know that active wells are an issue, and normally there's a circumference basically, and I'm just looking at where that site is versus where some of the buildings are. The back of some of the nearest buildings are like 250 feet. And I would think that the closest point that the building would be based on that, on what I'm looking at, is well over 300 feet. I don't have really a concern about the well. Actually, the building across the street, the cathedral, is probably closer. In fact, that building, which has multiple thousand people in it on a Sunday, that doesn't concern me. I do have a concern though with the discussion that was addressing the sewer. And I can imagine that taking that sewer from that corner by get-go is going to have an easement of some dimension. And I can't see those trees surviving. So I think the development team really needs to address that corner, because I just think simply saying that those trees are existing and they're a great buffer, they're coming down. I would estimate that the majority of those will come down just to get equipment in there to put that sewer in. So I'd like to see a solution there that addresses the impact of that sewer there, because it's not going to happen, and then you're going to have an argument later on, in my opinion. Then the other one is, I really think, I'm not sure if the basins appear to be placed in by a landscape designer. I would ask if the civil engineer could address if they really do have enough area for all the impervious pavement and roof area to handle the stormwater. I know the statement has been made, it has to be designed by code, which it does. But if you have a 4-basin and then you take it to another basin and then into the storm system, do you really have, has that been addressed from a design standpoint yet, from an engineering design standpoint? And do you have enough area to make that happen, or will we be looking at alternative methods that may be quite costly, like subsurface storage pipe? Those are my questions.
Okay, would the developer like to respond to Commissioner Habel's questions?
Well, let me address the tree issue. To the degree that any trees would have to be removed to accomplish the sanitary sewer tie-in, we would replant those with a continuation of most likely the evergreens, because that seems to be the best screening choice for that area. That would be our intent then, is to do that, and that could certainly be a requirement. As to the basin area, John, you should probably respond to that.
Yeah, again, good questions. From a planning commission document standpoint, the use of the site was what was important, and how the various areas on the site were planned to be used were important. The level of detail to determine the overall amount of stormwater management, yes, necessary, hasn't been done yet, but it's not uncommon on projects like this for a portion of the stormwater management to be underground. So some of those hybrid type systems where certain portions go to one, drain through another, and then end up out in the one in front, and then go to the outlet to the road, that is some combination of multiple basins, or one basin, or 2 basins and underground structures will more than likely be necessary to satisfy the requirements for this site.
Yeah, because the point of my question was, if the area had to be enlarged, we don't want to sacrifice screening or other landscaping, which is obviously very, very important to the residents abutting the properties. Thanks.
Any other questions, Rob?
Ed,
No,
sorry.
no, I'm done.
Okay. Would any other commissioner like to ask a question at this point?
I would, it's Sandy.
Yes, Sandy, go ahead.
Okay, so I've been taking notes and I'm glad we're doing this before making the motion because during discussion, I mean, it seems to always happen. You have the discussion before the motion, but there's points that I think that need to be added to the motion if we make a motion and have it seconded. And obviously the one that they said was the oil well, and then all the landscaping issues, including, you know, when the sewer gets hooked up, replacing those trees, making sure that that's covered in the motion. But one thing that has set with me, I guess, is the building design. And I know, I understand that we don't have like what Hudson does and they keep the Western Reserve look and everything. But I understand that that could be a trademark look for their car wash. Is there anything that can be done to make it look more conducive to the surroundings instead of sticking out like a sore thumb, as was noted? So do we have any levity there or anything like that? And I know the developer's probably going, oh my gosh. But I'm just asking.
If I can just add, again, we don't, Porter's Crossing, we had design standards. We have some basic design standards in our code, and that's where that 60% front facade. This is a different type of building. You could require it be a brick, and in all the in 60% brick versus EFS, and for the entire site because it's long and narrow. That's up to you, and it's up to, and the developer would comment on that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of glass. I think it's a good thing, but you could cut down on some of the colors, I guess, by requiring a brick facade on a portion of it. That is something you can do as a condition.
I'm just trying to think of a way to have a win-win where it is more harmonious with the area and still achieve what the developer wants to do.
So I could comment, I guess, to that. We actually, this is a spec building or a design building that we've partnered with a group that we are developing here. There are some things we can do, like the cultured stone and the 60%, which we were going to make sure that we do. The blue for us is our trademark. It's our Conrad's blue color. You know, we have 38 locations with that, and the reason that it's called Blue Falls Car Wash is also in addition to that. So that is very important for us, for our development.
I get that. I know it's like McDonald's arches, so I understand. I just was trying to be helpful.
In the glass, so we comment on the glass, the reason that's there is to provide an open feeling for the wash. You know, there's actually been studies done that have shown most car washes are claustrophobic, and specific groups of individuals don't go through them for that reason. So it's developed to have an open feeling going through.
Thank you. Andy, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't, but I do think that those things need to be added to that motion, that sample motion.
Okay.
Specifically the oil well study, research.
Do that. Absolutely.
I have another note that says moving the trash containers to the front, more to the forefront of the property so that noise isn't right in their backyards.
Well, what we'll do is, if I can get a motion and we can then, at the end of the motion, we can add any requirements that the commissioners want to place upon the motion. And well, let's say I make a motion, someone makes a motion and it gets second, then we can either add to it up front or amend it so that all the commissioners are satisfied that whatever requirements they feel they would like placed on this particular motion are included. And so, if that's okay, I mean, that's generally our procedure on that. And then we'll make sure that all requirements the commissioners want would be included in the motion. So if someone would like to make a motion, I'll put that out there.
I make a motion. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. The Planning Commission recommends the approval of project CZ-20-00011 Blue Falls Car Wash with the following conditions. 1, the proposed car wash and vacuum hours of operation are Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., Sundays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and closed on New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas Day. 2, the front setback shall be no greater than 90 feet. 3, the final design shall include 10 guest and employee parking spaces. 4, 60% of the front facade shall be covered with brick, and emphasize brick, stone, or precast stone. 5, landscaping must meet Chapter 1145 landscape design. In addition, a 6-foot solid fence shall be installed to the rear of the queuing lane to block automobile headlights. 6, the applicant must tie into the Summit County sanitary sewer system. 7, the applicant shall grant a 10-foot wide strip of land parallel with Portage Trail West to the city for the Portage Trail Improvement Project. 8, the applicant must meet all traffic impact study recommendations. 9, the applicant shall meet section 1124-03 flood or 0.03 floodplain and stormwater regulations. 10, exterior lighting must meet section 1143.08. 11, all conditional use requirements must be included in the zoning certificate application and plans.
And Sandy, you can add some things and we can discuss also with the other commissioners if you agree to add them.
Okay. 12, an oil well research and study should be conducted to make sure that, you know, everything is safe and according to any and all state and local regulations. All the trees, 13 trees to be added were removed in lieu of, I don't know how to say this correctly, but in lieu of the sanitary sewer with evergreens and like trees to create a solid buffer year round.
Also, Sandy, I'd like to add to that, that the existing landscape plan at the rear of the site that is placed there as a buffer be widened and extended to the full extent possible allowed by the site, and that evergreen trees that have year-round thick needles that don't drop off as time goes on be placed on a shallow mound so that we can maximize the buffer provided by that treed area.
Well, you're wordier than me, Ed.
I'm definitely wordy, but
That's
that's
fine.
important.
I agree. That's fine. And I think to amend, as I said before, the one, let's see, it's number 4 with 60% front facade. I would prefer brick. I hope that would make the residents happier. But I think it would look more traditional. I think it should work okay with the other part of the buildings. How do you guys feel about that?
Well,
I agree with you, Sandy.
stone, I think would be good too. You know, the
Am I allowed to comment or no? At this
Sure.
point? I don't know. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to take a look at the culture stone that's on the other, the buildings.
No, I have not seen your other buildings.
In my opinion, it looks sharper than the brick, and then you start to introduce reddish and blue colors.
Yeah.
First white and blue, you know, we'd actually prefer more blue, but the cultured stone looks sharp compared to brick, in my opinion. But
All right, I'm going to defer to that, I guess, since we can't be so strict. So So that's my motion.
If you would add another thing, if up to you, Sandy, I'd like to recommend that you add that the trash dumpster pickup be limited so that it would be during traditional hours and not at night or early in the morning, so as not to disturb the residents.
Okay,
We put a time in, like maybe, let's say, not before 8:00 a.m., not after 6 p.m.
I think that's great.
It's very accomplishable, right, Dominic? Feel the same way?
Yeah, that's easy.
I do too.
Okay,
With these changes, I would second the motion.
Okay, who second?
I did.
Okay, I can't see
Let me
that.
get, hold on, let me stop
got-
sharing here.
Commissioner James.
Ah, there's your pretty face. Okay, we have a second. Is Lori, could you call out the commissioners for a vote?
Sandy LaCasio,
aye.
Jerry James,
Aye.
Joe Perot,
Unfortunately, my first meeting, for personal reasons, I need to abstain, although I agree with everything that you've done. As a vote, I need to abstain in a public forum
okay.
for personal reasons, sorry.
Rob Habel,
No.
Jake Ricker,
I also vote no.
who am I asking? And Ed Monaco.
Okay, I vote yes. That's 3 yes, 2 no, 1 abstain. Motion fails. That's it.
Wait a minute, say that again?
I got 3 yeses, 2 nos, and 1 abstain. Motion fails. You need 4 for a
Oh.
majority. So, Fred, we can ask the developer to have a council with your department and
I'll have to look at the code. Typically, it doesn't go to council unless there's a process. So I'll look at that and get back with the developer about how that process works without saying something and looking at the code right now. But typically, well, let me look here. I have my paper code.
Do I understand how many planning commission members there are? Are there members not there today?
there's 1 additional member who's not there, but the members present. And you need a majority. We need 4 votes or yes, we don't have them, motion fails.
The code says after the vote, if it fails or it's continued consideration of the conditional zoning certificate to the next schedule, no conditional certificate shall continue by the planning commission more than once. If the issue is continued, limitation on reapplication. I'll have to look at this closer, but I don't believe it necessarily goes to city council, but let me look and we'll go from there. That's all I can say.
So what is, if there were 7 members, would 4 still need to be the number?
Yes, it's always 4.
It's always 4, no matter how many members are present?
Correct.
It's the majority of the full commission. Okay, I'll have you talk to Fred, and at this point, we'll move on to the next item, which is the meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Who seconded that? I didn't see it.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, Jake.
All right, motion carries. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. That's our meeting. I'll ask the applicant to work with the planning department to see what else can happen on this thing. Thank you all for coming. Meeting's adjourned.
Right.
Good night, everybody.
Night, everyone.
Hardest hit country, second only to the United States.
Top U.S. health official Dr. Anthony Fauci says the U.S. is still knee-deep in the first wave of the coronavirus